You are ready anytime, sir. The meeting is live.
Well, good evening, everyone. This is another virtual meeting, a regular meeting of the Township Board and Charter Township of Meridian, March 16th, 2021. And I'd like to call the meeting to order. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And with that pledge, we will now ask our clerk, Deborah Guthrie, to call the roll.
All right. Clerk Guthrie is here. Treasurer DeShane.
Here.
Trustee Jackson.
Here.
Trustee Opsimer.
Here.
Supervisor Stika.
Here.
Trustee Sunland. I don't know why I still have my hand over my heart like I'm still doing the pledge. Somebody could have said something to me. And Trustee Wazinski.
Here.
I just thought to keep your head out of your eyes, actually. That's all I thought.
It's freezing in my house, actually. So I was kind of like holding myself.
Okay, so we have, what, 6 present?
Sorry, yes, 6.
And Trustee Sunland is not here. Okay.
All right.
We start out with a presentation today, and we have Roth, I believe it's MC Rothborn, is going to give us a presentation on the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission, and we're all looking forward to hearing about that.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And I'm wondering if I should present sharing my screen, or if you all have the presentation. It's just four slides. I'm expecting it to take about 5 minutes. What's your preference?
We're more than willing to have you share the screen as long as you get permission, Mr. Davies.
Yep. Looks like I can do it.
Yep.
All right. So here we have it. So thanks again for inviting me. My name is MC. I'm a commissioner at the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission, or MICRC. And let me get my notes here. Thanks for providing this opportunity for me to we're essentially seeking public comment. So I appreciate the opportunity to comment during your meeting. And did the slide advance? I have only 2 screens. No, it did not advance, sorry. So this is the history of the MICRC, or the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. In 2018, the Michigan voters passed Proposal 2, a ballot initiative for voters and not legislators to take responsibility for nonpartisan redistricting, and created the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. There are 13 of us. We are randomly selected. We all put our names in the ballot, but we do not represent. I'm coming to you from Lansing, Michigan, but I do not. I'm close to you all, but I don't necessarily represent our region. And of course, we're virtual, so I guess anyone could do it. But the point is that we are randomly selected, and that includes 4 Democrats, 5 independents, and 4 Republicans to make the 13. The MICRC is responsible for redistricting the U.S. Congressional, Michigan House, and Michigan Senate districts. So we'll essentially draw 3 maps, ultimately with a lot of public input. So that public input is in public hearings. So before we draft any redistricting plan, the commission shall hold at least 10 public hearings throughout the state. At this point, we have intentions to start in May and finish in June. So over about 8 weeks, we intend to do approximately 16 of these public hearings. But again, we have we don't know exactly how it's going to unfold. So take that with a grain of salt, please. The purpose for these public hearings is to inform the public about the redistricting process, what's happening tonight. We want to share the purpose and responsibilities of the commission, and we want to solicit information from the public about potential redistricting plans. So this is the criteria that the commission has in order to create these maps, these 3 different maps that we talked about. And this criteria comes directly from the state constitution. It is the first, and it is in order, meaning we have to take the first criteria here before we can, it is weighted greater than the second. So you all can see it, the equal population. I would only add that this is federally mandated by the US Constitution. And in addition to equal population under number 1, the Voting Rights Act is a second requirement that is a top priority. So we comply with the Voting Rights Act as well as with the equal population, that each district shall include an equal population if they will comply with the Voting Rights Act for the federal government. Then we have the geographically contiguous criteria, that these districts that we draw will be geographically contiguous. We have communities of interest as the third and relatively significant priority after the first two. The communities of interest is where we intend to receive public comment, and it is not necessarily defined exactly, and it is defined in the next slide. So I'll just ask you to wait, but I'll give you more detail on communities of interest. And then you can see number 4, 5, 6, and 7. I appreciate it if you'll allow me to just jump ahead, because I don't want to take too much of your time, but I do want you to see that this is from the Constitution. I want you to see these are the criteria that all 13 of us will be basing our decisions on, and as we direct our mapping company, the firm that we've chosen to help draw these, they will be doing so during these public hearings, and that is essentially the public comment that I'm referring to. So in terms of communities of interest, the third criteria, they may include but shall not be limited to populations that share cultural or historical characteristics or economic interests. But they shall not include relationships with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates. So that's more or less, that's the definition we're working with. And there are academic, I guess they're institutions, they're academics who are engaged at the University of Michigan and at the MSU University, Michigan State University. And those organizations, those academic institutions are helping us understand. As a commissioner, I'm learning about this, right? The other 12 of us are learning about this. As we learn, we all learn, right? Every citizen, it's the first time we're doing this. And so they have some idea, and they're trying to help us understand how broad, how limited, but the point is it's not totally defined. And so for Meridian Township, for example, we'd like you to consider yourselves, how do you consider yourselves a community of interest? Or are there parts of the township that should be held together because of an economic interest? For example, those are some of the things that I wanted to share tonight. And in conclusion, yeah, the questions or anything you want to learn about is at michigan.gov/MICRC. And there's this information is also at that our redistricting website, which I believe is redistricting@michigan.gov. That is it, short and sweet. And I'll stop sharing and take any questions if you have them.
Well, before I give it to others, I'll ask you a quick question. I realize that there's a delay in the census numbers, and how is that going to affect your work?
Excellent question. So we are trying to understand it ourselves. What we've done to try to, I'll answer it with the light on the township, right? Having to draw or turn these maps into ballots. So we have asked for I believe it's called a relief. We've asked for relief from the from the Supreme Court of Michigan. I don't think we've asked yet, but we are preparing to ask, in addition to with the Secretary of State, who I suppose will help townships and other political entities, right, understand how you turn these redistricting maps into ballots. But we're seeking relief from the deadline, and we intend to do that before the end of the year. And again, no one has a crystal ball, so we're aware that the census data is currently slated to come out on September 30th, and we're preparing in eventuality if it comes out earlier, but also in the event that it comes out later than September 30th. So we are seeking relief from the November 1st deadline. I believe we're looking at December. And again, we will try to help every clerk and then municipality that needs to turn these maps into voting districts, help them understand how it's going to work. But that's really the Secretary of State's job. That's not the Commission's job. But we are seeking relief from that deadline in conjunction with the Secretary of State so that can occur coordinated.
Other board members, questions for Mr. Rothorn? Oh, don't be shy now.
We're
Mr. Opsimer.
Yes, Mr. Rothorn, first, thank you for your service on the commission. My question, how is the commission, at least thus far in your deliberations, how are you weighting some of these factors which compete against one another? For instance, recognizing municipal boundaries also, runs counter to having fair lines that do not favor one party or the other. For instance, when you look at Detroit and what has happened to the Detroit vote, you have like 92% to 8% differential in the vote there on the two major political party lines. And there's no part of the state that offsets that. So I guess, and to put it another way, how are you weighting, have there been discussions on weighting those factors and which might take more precedent?
So I suppose the most concise answer really is we are guided, and I would even say constrained by those 8 criteria that I gave you. And because we don't have any maps, right? So we haven't deliberated yet. And we frankly haven't even, we've just engaged our mapping consultants, right? The firm that will help lead a process that we will direct as the commissioners, but they will essentially they will help us with a process, and we will answer that question actually like moment by moment, but we do intend to use communities of interest as a key piece of how to deal with that dilemma, right? So this is one of the reasons we want public input. We want to know, like, if you want to belong, if you identify with the, if Meridian Township identifies with the 96, right, along that area, and if you want to be more with Howell, or if you identify more along the 127 route, because you feel closer to the Jackson area or the Lansing area, right? That community of interest, however it's defined, is in Michigan State University. Is that a community of interest that's separate? We don't have those answers. We, the commission, do not have those answers. So in order to answer your question, frankly, we need more data in order to deliberate. And we're trying to understand how we're going to do it, but frankly, it's too early to say. And these are the hard calls we're going to make. But we understand that there's a cost to every map line that we make, or that we draw, that's outside of a county or a voting district. I'm not sure what the actual word is yet. I'm still a layperson. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I suppose as sufficiently as you can at this juncture.
Yeah.
I don't know, I guess to give my feedback and my public input based on
Yes.
what I've heard in the community. Certainly what I have heard predominantly is people want fair and balanced lines in terms of the proportionate vote across the state. And so that's, that weights against honoring some traditional county and municipal boundaries. So that is what I am predominantly hearing, is they want fair and just lines. So, if the popular vote is 52% in favor of one party, that party has proportionate or as close to proportionate representation as possible. So that is the overwhelming majority of the input that I have received. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll pass that on.
Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you. And Commissioner Rothorn, thank you for your service as well. People are very excited about this new commission. There was a lot of people that got involved in the ballot initiative in 2018. And as Trustee Opsimer pointed out, people do want fair districts that are much more representative rather than the gerrymander districts that we have now. This notion of communities of interest is interesting to me, but to me, it should come in second to the a fair proportionment of the vote, rather than having these very lopsided districts we have now. Is one of your assumptions that Michigan will have one less congressional seat, that it's going down from, I believe, 15 to 14 after the census is released?
So I'm trying to make as few assumptions as possible. It's overwhelming, right? The sort of the talk. So I've heard it, but frankly, I don't spend much time, other than now as a commissioner, I haven't spent much time debating it. So I don't have that assumption. But I do understand that we tend to be losing, right? Michigan tends to be losing population. And that's, again, I don't know if that's an assumption, but it's the popular, yeah.
We aren't so much losing as we're not gaining as other parts of the country have.
Thank you. Yes, important distinction. So I apologize. I don't know if I answered your question or if there, yeah.
You have, thank you.
Okay, and to be super clear, like fairness is the overarching goal of this commission. What we are aware of as a commission, I think even the folks that set this translated the 2018 ballot initiative into this commission, what those folks were aware of is that it is not easy to call fair. What is fair? So that's the idea, is that we have to make hard decisions, and we will not have a gerrymandered state, but we will not have something that is going to please everybody. We know that. And so we're going to, that's why there's 13 of us. That's why that's why we're randomly selected, right? We don't represent. And we know that we will not have a gerrymandered situation, because we recognize that gerrymandering is really when the politicians choose the people, right? And this is in every way, this Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission is the people choosing the political districts, right? It's not gerrymandering. It is map making. And it's the first time we're doing it. So it's exciting, like you said. And I think we're all excited. And I can speak for every commissioner. I know that we each have that intention to be fair and frankly understand as much as we can to make a well-informed choices.
Any other board members have any questions or comments? Fairness is a really tough nut to crack. Spent many years on a school board, and one of the things I learned there was that fairness does not mean giving the same to each, but rather to giving to each what they need and what makes them as equal as possible. So it's a really tough one.
Well said.
All righty. Thank you so much for your presentation. We look forward to seeing your work and the opportunity to chime in with this on as far as the communities of interest and other things. And it's going to be an exciting year.
Thank you. And I'm the closest one, so feel free to invite me back or reach out, and I'm happy to have been here. Thanks for inviting me.
All righty. Thank you. Okay, I had asked or invited Sandra Drake, our representative to the CADL, the library board, to appear if she could, and I don't see her on the pictures. Mr. Geeves, is she listed anywhere? Is she here?
I am not seeing a Sandra Drake. We do have the raise hand feature enabled right now. I'm going to lower everyone's hand. If she's connected via a different connection, like maybe that Galaxy S10 Plus, if you use the raise hand feature right now, we'll make sure we get you promoted so you can speak.
And I didn't really get a follow-up from her to know for sure that she could do it. So if she's not here, she's not here.
I'm seeing no hands, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, we now go on to citizens addressing agenda and non-agenda items. This is an opportunity. Each person gets 3 minutes. It'll be timed, and we ask you to be fair and appropriate in your comments, not to demean anyone, not to name anybody by name, not to use any language that's inappropriate, but to give your opinion or your point of view or your item as best you can in clear, concise language. And with that, Mr. Geeves, do we have anybody that wants to comment with regard to their positions?
We are having a little bit of trouble with our audio on home TV tonight, but we can, of course, take comment via 517-349-1232 for anybody watching that way and seeing the comments in the closed caption and or the Facebook Live, and I believe the other media streams we have on the internet do have proper audio. Inside the attendee area, we have no hands raised right now, but of course anyone in that area is welcome to use the raise hand feature, and we can give you the ability to make public comment at this time.
Once again, if you're calling in, it's 349-1232. Is that right?
Affirmative, sir.
Okay.
I'm seeing no hands and I'm hearing no phone calls, sir.
All right, then thank you. We will move on then to the Township Manager's Report. Mr. Walsh, what have you got for us today?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. If you don't mind, I'd like to yield to for a moment to the Chief of Police, just to update the Township Board on a new program that we're involved in with mental health and supporting the police and supporting people who are in need. So maybe, Chief, could you give a brief update of the program that you're bringing to the township?
Certainly, Manager Walsh. What we have done is work cooperatively with the Ingham, Clinton, and Eaton Community Mental Health, and we have deployed a tablet device so that if somebody's in need of assistance, maybe emotional crisis, or they need other resources, it gives us a connection where we can put them in a one-on-one conversation with a clinician, somebody who has the toolkit to handle that emotional crisis. Today was the first day we kicked off, and already deployed it on one call for service yet today. So we're trying to get it in the officers, get it in the hands of the folks who can hopefully get them the help they need to get through their day or get over the hump they're at in the during their crisis.
Thank you for that. Thank you for what you're doing. That's a really important service. And Ms. Guthrie, the record can state that Trustee Sundlin is now with us for your minutes. Couple of other things, Mr. Supervisor, the board may want to be aware of is I've mentioned several times the 6-acre rezoning on Jolly Road that went before the Planning Commission on March 8th. It'll be back before the Planning Commission for their action on Monday night, the 22nd. And I would expect that to be brought to you then in early April for the board to consider. I want to thank our communications department. The Prime Meridian magazine is out. It's been about a year since we were able to put one together and get it out. The accolades keep rolling in for Meridian Township. Just came out today that Niche is ranking us the 6th, Okemos, the Meridian Township, the 6th best place to live in the nation. I don't know that it gets any better than that. I guess it could. We could be 5th, but that's an outstanding acknowledgement for this community and everyone who serves this community, everyone who lives in this community, and everyone who served this community prior to all of us. The large dog park is closed momentarily for issues with mud. I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Perry tonight. 6 years ago today, he joined our team here in Meridian Township. So we've been very fortunate to have his services. And as always, I'd like to close on something that's really positive, and I guess I'll say something positive. It's not so positive, but we want to certainly address Mark Kieselbach's announcement that he is retiring. Mr. Perry's been with us for 6 years. I think that's 72 months. Well, Mr. Kieselbach has served us for 496 months. So he is just going to be 4 short. We're thinking about keeping him on somehow to get to that 500 mark. I haven't figured that out yet, but as all of you know, and there'll be plenty of time to pass on our accolades to Mark and his what he's done for our department. If you look at how this community's developed, if you look at how you drive down Grand River and notice, well, you probably don't notice as many signs, and they certainly don't jump out at you. All that is a tribute to Mark's work, the ambiance of this community and his commitment and loyalty. You just don't see people in local government staying 41 years in one place anymore. And I just, there'll be, as I said, there'll be future opportunities, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that this evening. So thank you, Mark, for everything. And we appreciate that. And I'll close with more good news. The Deer Cull program, the Amplified program is complete. We reached our goals by working with the DNR. And I want to thank our police department, our parks department, for their leadership in making that happen. So that's my report, Mr. Supervisor and Board, unless you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the supervisor? For the manager? I don't see any. I think you're off the hook, Mr. Walsh. Okay, excuse me. We now go on to board member reports of activities and announcements. Board members, do you have anything you want to announce or any activities you want to relate? Mr. DeShane. You're muted, sir.
me on mute. Just three quick things to update on. On Thursday, the 4th of March, I attended our EDC meeting here in Town Hall. Tomorrow, I will be attending the board meeting of the Capillary Area Transit Authority, which I serve as the township representative on. And Thursday morning at 8 a.m., the Brownfields Redevelopment Authority is meeting. And the BRA is fully functional. We have made our first major payout for BRA eligible reimbursements and expect more of those reimbursement requests to come to before the BRA, now that the BRA is receiving income in the form of taxes being paid that are eligible for payout. So those are the three meetings I wanted to bring the board up to date on.
Thank you. Other board members, any reports? Yes, Trustee Wazinski.
Hello, Supervisor. Thank you. Just a couple reports. The Environmental Commission has received 5 grants for the green grant applications. We have, just to remind everybody, $10,000 set aside by the board, but we've also got another $1,000 donated by Granger. We'll review those applications by March 21st and then hopefully come to a consensus thereafter. I also attended a groundwater management board training today as a new member of that board, and it was a great training put on by the sustainable planner, and just gave some overview on purpose, that the purpose is to regionally protect our groundwater, which is ultimately our drinking water. Some of the projects that they've worked on in the past, as well as some maybe coming up, and how Meridian can benefit and or provide input there. That's all I have.
Thank you. Other board members? Trustee Jackson.
Thank you. I would just report that today, much of today and some of tomorrow, I have been and will be continuing to attend the Michigan Municipal League Capital Conference. In this particular meeting, the Michigan Municipal League is discussing with all the municipal, or many of the municipalities in Michigan, both the recently passed American Recovery Act, the funds that municipalities in the state can expect to receive from that, how they should use those funds. And in addition, other workshops talked about how townships should manage the remaining time with COVID-19, including issues with remote meetings and vaccinations and education of the public. And so hopefully tomorrow we will wrap that up, and we can I'll bring more information back to you next time about what was said and advised.
Well, thank you for go ahead.
One other thing, or one of the workshops that I attended this morning was actually hosted by our own representative, Julie Brixey. And so she was very helpful in talking about how township elected officials should relate to the legislature and how they can best have the legislature help them move their our actions and issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for attending. You're a good soldier to go to those meetings, even though it's virtual, I guess, at this point.
It is.
It's very time consuming, but also very educational. And you're sharing that with us is very helpful. Thank you. Other board members? I'm going to mention, before I call Mr. Officer, I want to mention that I guess we're having issues with the Xfinity and the television broadcast. And right now, if you want to hear us, which means what good is it for me to say this, I guess, you have to stream through Facebook or YouTube. Mr. Opsmer, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I just wanted to note for the board that the Transportation Commission will meet on Thursday and there will be a public hearing on phase 3 of the Lake Lansing to MSU pathway and trail system. And then the other big item on the Transportation Commission agenda is looking at the pathway master plan. The cart's a little bit in front of the horse. At our last meeting 2 months ago, we got some updates from Deputy Manager Perry on various trails projects, and the conversation inevitably kind of went into gaps and other shortcomings in the pathway system. So we haven't had our subcommittee group led by Director Kieselbach and Deputy Manager Perry yet, but the Transportation Commission will start kind of talking about those issues and those gaps and just taking inventory of them. So I just wanted to make the board and the public aware of that.
Excited to help out in the May elections. So in addition, several people said that they wanted to volunteer to help correct this mailer that went out. And I did put email in the communications section. So there really are not 2 clerks in Meridian Township. There is only one, and it was an accident, major accident by the printing company. And so thank you to everyone who reached out to me and volunteered to fix it and put an address label over the incorrected portion of the absentee ballot application. So that is all.
Well, the important part on the inside had the right name anyway. It was just a little return address thing, which was.
It's just, yeah, I mean, everything else is right. You send it in, you drop it off, you know, people,
Yeah.
I mean, one of the biggest questions we have is, I'm on the permanent absentee ballot list. Why am I getting this application? So you're really on a permanent absentee voter application list. So when you're on that, you automatically get an absentee voter application, which means you have to fill it out to say that you want your ballot, and then we send it to you. So that's the basic process.
That was worth mentioning, believe me. Okay, anyone else? I'll have a little report. Earlier today, the office of our Congresswoman, Slotkin, was originally supposed to be with her, but she got pulled away to something in Congress. Met with leaders from the various communities throughout her district, which is better part of, you know, Ingham, Livingston, and Oakland counties. And they gave us a rather thorough report on the American Rescue Plan Act, which recently was signed by the president, which is going to be sending money to the states and then eventually to local governments, including Meridian. The one thing that they emphasized over and over again is none of the numbers are certain at this point. They're all kind of up in the air. They're close. They think that they're fairly close on the numbers, but until Treasury gets its hands on this, they can't really swear that any of the numbers that are in any of the documents that anyone has seen or any of the press information are exactly right. So we could see some changes, but they hopefully will not be very major. The money that will come to us has to first go to the state, and then it'll come to us. It can be spent on 4 different areas: pandemic impacts on people, businesses, et cetera, in our community, premium pay for workers, lost revenue that can be tied to the pandemic, and the necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. And that's a key, since one of our big goals this year is broadband, and we may be having to look at how we fund infrastructure. And I know water and sewer's got some things going on, and part of the money can be spent there as well. Those are the 4 areas that our township could spend money. It can't be used for pension funds, so our manager will not be happy. And it cannot be used to deal with any of the effects of any tax cuts, which I guess we did lower one of our millages, but it can't be used for that. There's no limit on how the broadband money can be spent that they know of so far. So we'll have to see how that goes. The bonus pay that is possible under one provision is retroactive theoretically back to March if you want to do that. There can be no state added.
Unclear picture of funding for villages. Yep.
Okay. Right, because if you have a village, which we do not at this time, even though on the map it'll say Village of Okemos, whatever. We don't have a village in the sense of a separately governed entity. But those townships that do, there's a deduct, and they don't know whether that's coming out of the entire pool of money or just from that township. There's still a lot of issues that the U.S. Treasury will be working out. All righty. With that, we're able to move on to the approval of the agenda. And folks, we did have a new agenda that came out. It added a couple of resolutions. Hopefully you all saw that. I know Ms. Jackson was tied up today. Maybe she didn't see that. She says she did. Okay, good. So can we have a motion? Ms. Jackson. You're muted.
Thank you. I move approval of the revised agenda.
Okay. Seconded by Treasurer. Okay, any other comments? Then we need a vote. Ms. Guthrie?
All right, trustee Opsimer,
Yes.
trustee Sumlin,
Yes.
trustee Wazinski,
Yes.
supervisor Syka,
Yes.
clerk Guthrie votes yes, and treasurer DeShane,
Yes.
and trustee Jackson.
Yes.
All right, motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. We now go on to the consent agenda, which has on it communications, our minutes from February 23rd virtual special board meeting, and our minutes from the March 2nd virtual regular board meeting, the bills that need to be finally paid, the grant submission for the Towner Road Park Playground, and lastly, the regular board meeting date change. We need to change the election week meeting from a Tuesday to a Thursday, which is going to change it to May, I don't have it in front of me. It's got
6.
to May 6th. Okay. All right. Is there someone want to make a motion on the consent agenda? Treasurer.
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Supported by trustee Jackson. We need a vote.
Trustee Opsimer,
Yes.
trustee Sumlin,
Yes.
trustee Jackson,
Yes.
treasurer DeShane,
Yes.
clerk Guthrie votes yes, supervisor Syka,
Yes.
and trustee Wazinski.
Yes.
All right, 7-0.
Thank you all. Questions for attorney? He's not here at this time. He will be later in the meeting. No hearings. We now come to our action items. The first action item is the 6503 Park Lake Road open space easement. We discussed this at our last meeting, and would Mr. Menser or Mr. Kisa, who's here today? Mr. Menser, would you like to tell us about it quickly before we go ahead?
I can. Good evening, everyone.
Oh, Mark. Go ahead. Thank you, Mark.
This is open space easement under the Farm and Open Space Preservation Program. The township has to go through the process first to accept the property, and then from there it would go on to the state. Based on your last discussion, there was a question about termination, and I put that in the most recent memo that either the township can initiate a termination of this easement during its life term, and also the property owner can request it to be terminated. If the easement is sold during this time and not to somebody who is already named on the easement, then there's a process that they would have to go through to guarantee
It's 324.36101 to 324.36116 of Michigan's compiled laws annotated.
Is there support for that motion?
Or
Supported by trustee Wazinski. Mr. Officer, you want to say anything about it?
Yeah, I would just speak very briefly that the City of East Lansing Planning Commission has also obviously reviewed this and signed off, and we have that communication in our packet, as well as the Ingham County Conservation District. And as I noted at the last meeting, from the land preservation standpoint, while this is not being preserved in perpetuity, this is adjacent to one of our existing preserves, and it's adjacent on its western border to land that may at some point enter into our land preservation program. We're having ongoing conversations and have had ongoing conversations with another landowner. So I do think this is a good first step, and we will see how this relationship evolves, but much of our land preservation program is predicated upon the good faith and the charity of people.
Recognizing the April 2021 as Autism Awareness Month in Meridian Township. We're only mid-March, but we're not going to have a business meeting before April. He and Mr. Osborne and I thought it'd be a good time to adopt this now to make the public as aware as possible of autism and the issues it presents and the tactics that are trying to be used, et cetera, to help people and help families who have autism. And with that, I'm looking for a motion, Mr. Opsmer.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I move to approve the resolution recognizing April of 2021 as Autism Awareness Month in Meridian Township.
Support.
Supported by the clerk. Anything you want to say about it, or you want to read it, or what do you want to do, Dan?
Yeah, I could read through it real quick. I'll start with the whereases. A resolution recognizing April of 2021 as Autism Awareness Month in Meridian Township. Whereas autism refers to a range of conditions characterized by challenges with social skills, repetitive behavior, speech, nonverbal communication, as well as unique strengths and differences. In 2013, the American Psychiatric Association merged 4 previously distinct diagnoses into one umbrella diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, otherwise known as ASD. These include autistic disorder, childhood, disintegrative disorder, pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified, and Asperger's syndrome. It is the result of neurological disorder that affects the normal functioning of the brain that is believed to be the cause of genetic and environmental factors. And whereas families living with autism face unique challenges and frequently experience significant financial cost for specialized education and support services, the uniqueness of each individual with autism makes the experience of living with autism different for each family. And whereas autism is a lifelong condition and the necessary support and treatment changes as people on the spectrum move through major life phases. Their quality of life depends not only upon the foundation that is provided in childhood, but also on ongoing supports that are specific to the educational, medical, social, recreational, family, and employment needs of the individual. And whereas autism knows no racial, ethnic, social boundaries, family income, lifestyle, educational levels, and can affect any family and any child. And whereas autism is the fastest growing developmental disability in the United States today. And whereas in 2020, the CDC reported approximately 1 in 54 children in the United States is diagnosed with ASD, according to 2016 data. Research also shows that boys are 4 times more likely to be diagnosed with autism than girls. And whereas April 2021 is National Autism Awareness Month, now therefore be it resolved by the Township Board of the Charter Township of Meridian, Ingham County, Michigan, that the members of the Meridian Township Board declare April 2021 as Autism Month in Meridian Township.
Yeah. Any other board members who want to comment? Ms. Buzinski, was that your hand?
I could comment, well written and feedback, sorry. Well written, and just want to mention that, I have friends and family members that have autistic children and want awareness to be brought to also those caregivers that I know face a lot of struggles. So this is really important. It's fast growing. And as a community, I think we need to be very welcoming. And I can make the motion.
No, I'm sorry.
Do we need a motion?
I believe we need a second.
Okay.
I seconded it.
Yeah, I thought it was seconded, and you were speaking on it first, Dan, and Courtney was speaking second on it. Yeah, I have a nephew I've watched grow from, you know, infancy to early adulthood with autism, and it is a challenge, and I know that many people experience it, and it can have great outcomes too if you work really hard and have the right support. And I think it's important we call everyone's attention to it. I know that the school districts here in our township do very well in terms of recognizing autism and all the various types. You know, they've all been merged under one category now, and to work with those families and those students. And we appreciate that as well. Anyone else? Ms. Sutherland?
Yeah, I just want to say that my son has recently become engaged to a young lady whose brother is severely autistic. She works for Autism Services in the Royal Oak area or Detroit area. So she actually helps provide people with services when they're searching to, you know, get their needs met. So I just wanted to say that my son has committed to marrying into a family that with someone severely autistic, and I just really admire him because, you know, that was a life decision on his part. In addition to getting married, it was a life decision. So I just really proud of him. Thank you.
I see any other hands? Yes, clerk.
I want to thank Trustee Opsimer for raising awareness and bringing this to the board. My nephew has Asperger's syndrome, and so he received a ton of support from his parents and from our family, and we all live in Okemos together, so we were able to be there for my brother and my sister-in-law, and the Okemos school system was fantastic. They were great supporting him and his needs, and he is functioning, you know, really well today as an adult. And so I've seen, it's dear to my heart, close to my heart, what some of these symptoms are. And so I want to thank you for bringing this to the board and having us pass this resolution. I really appreciate it on a personal level.
Trustee Opsimer.
Just a few closing remarks. I appreciate everyone's thoughts and sentiment. Obviously, everyone knows that this is a very close issue for me. It hits close to home. I have an adult brother with autism who I grew up with, and then an 11-year-old son, Jack, who was diagnosed at age 4 with autism. I would also, you know, as we talk about developmental disabilities like ASD, we should also acknowledge that there are many other developmental disabilities out there, and some of those families are not as well off today in terms of the services rendered because it's not as prevalent, and it is very difficult to get parity legislation requiring insurance coverage. That's the number one factor that's changed for families with autistic children or adults. We have a number of facilities either in the township today or adjacent to the township that offer, you know, ABA therapy services that were not available until legislative reforms in 2016. So great strides have been made as it relates to supporting families with autism, but we also need to acknowledge that there are many other developmental disabilities out there, and those families can often get overlooked as we look at these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, then we need a vote.
Treasurer DeShane?
You're muted, Mr. DeShane.
Yes.
Trustee Jackson?
Yes.
Trustee Opsimer?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland,
Yes.
trustee Wazinski,
Yes.
clerk Guthrie votes yes, and supervisor Stika.
Yes,
Motion passes 7-0.
thank you all so much. Our next item is the Capillary District Library appointment. Sandra Drake has been serving now for a couple of years as our representative on the cattle board. And I'm proposing that we renew her for another 2 years. Ms. Jackson, you're muted.
I move to approve the reappointment of Sandra Drake to the Capital Area District Library for a term ending 4/15/2023.
Support.
Treasurer, all right. Any comments, Ms. Jackson?
I would only reiterate that Ms. Drake has been serving in this capacity for the township. I believe it's the last 4 years, 3 years.
It's either 2 or 3.
Okay. And it's my pleasure to promote her reappointment.
Mr. DeShane?
I would hope we could get Ms. Drake to speak at a future meeting and also bring with her our 2 librarians, Tom Moore from Hazlitt and Betsy Hull from the Okemos branch. Libraries are extremely important to our residents, and we support the cattle system very much in this township, both financially and otherwise. And it'd be good to get an update from them about their reopening plans, what they've been doing during the lockdown, et cetera. So we've got 2 great librarians in the township. Let's have them come back with our CATA representative.
Prior to putting forth the the reappointment of Ms. Drake, I did speak with representatives of the libraries as well as the friends of the libraries, and I got their input. And I guess in more recent times, Ms. Drake has been providing information to the friends and to the local libraries. So I'm hoping I can get her to do that occasionally for us as well. I hoped for today, but apparently it didn't work out. All right, do we need a vote?
All right. Clerk Guthrie votes yes, supervisor Stika,
Yes.
trustee Wazinski,
Yes.
trustee Sunland,
Yes.
trustee Opsimer,
Yes.
trustee Jackson,
Yes.
and treasurer DeShane.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Our next one is the Environmental Commission appointments. Due to some resignations, we've had 2 openings appear on our Environmental Commission. It's a very important commission. It gives a lot of input to this board, either directly or indirectly, all kinds of issues, including wetlands and environmental issues in the larger sense and our sustainability goals, et cetera. And I've put forth a memorandum that would suggest that we appoint Anna Colby to a term ending in 12/31/22, and Kendra Grisici, I'll pass on it, for 12/31/21, and would ask Ms. Wazinski, who's our liaison, if she wants to make a motion and talk about this.
Thank you, Supervisor. Sure. I'll move to approve the appointment of Anna Colby to the Environmental Commission for a term ending 12/31/2022, and move to approve the appointment of Kendra Grisici to the Environmental Commission for a term ending 12/31/2021.
I would also mention, by the way, that the commission itself has a history. It's not a requirement, but it's something that by custom has happened, where they usually interview candidates for replacing their members that leave. And they did interview 3 people and found all 3 of them were worthy. So it became a little tougher because I had to flip the coins and figure out which 2 out of the 3 to go forward with. And hopefully we'll find a good spot for the 3rd person in the near future, if not on this commission, somewhere else. Ms. Wazinski, do you want to say anything about this?
Sure, I would agree. I unfortunately missed the last Environmental Commission meeting due to family concerns, but the 3 applications were all fantastic. All have excellent credentials. And I just want to thank each of them for aspiring to serve on a commission here in the township. each had a little bit different perspective. And of course, wish we could have them all on the commission. But I will speak specifically to Ms. Grisecci. Is she has served already in an unofficial capacity for the Environmental Commission, also a member of the Green Team, and she worked with some of our staff and some of the other members to develop a wetland brochure to educate our residents on the wetland ordinances and how you can protect them. And also she's a founding member of the Green Neighborhood Network. So she's already provided a significant amount of service and looking forward to her providing more in the future. Not as familiar with Ms. Colby, but again, her credentials looked fantastic, and just want to commend each and every one of them for their commitment and wanting to serve.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak on this? Ms. Jackson?
I wanted to second the motion. I believe that was offered by Ms. Wazinski. I don't think we had a second.
Oh, thank you for keeping me on the ball. Thank you. Or rather, putting me back on the ball, I should say. Do you have anything you want to say on this, or is that it?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, then we will do a vote.
All right, Treasurer DeShane,
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Supervisor Stika,
Yes.
Trustee Jackson,
Yes.
Trustee Absemer,
Yes.
Trustee Sunland,
Yes.
and Trustee Wazinski.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Next item, really, we have to give credit to Trustee Opsimer. He did all the work on this and allowed me to put my name on his memo along with his. But it's a very important resolution calling on the Michigan legislature to appropriate all federal COVID-19 relief funding without undue burden on the school districts. There's been a lot happening. If you've paid any attention, both the Okemos and Hazlet boards had to have unexpected meetings in order to change their schedules to adapt because the legislature is requiring things that were unexpected in terms of how a program be provided in order to get the money. And so Mr. Opsimer put this together, and I'll call on Mr. Opsimer.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I will start with a motion. I move to approve the resolution in support of our school communities and call on the Michigan legislature to appropriate all federal COVID-19 relief funding without undue burden on school districts.
For a second? Trying to stay on the ball this time. Ms. Jackson. Okay, just seconds.
I will second that motion as well.
All right, and I don't think we need to read the whole thing, but can you kind of summarize for us, Mr. Opsimer?
Yeah, I thought it would be better to summarize on this because I didn't get into the mechanics of what really happened, but I think I felt like it was a good opportunity for the board to highlight and also stand with our school boards in solidarity that are going through a tough time here, especially Okemos schools in particular, which had kind of a hybrid plan that was unlike most other school districts in the state. They had planned for virtual learning in the morning with in-person in the afternoon because they had so many parents wishing to opt out, but also quite a few parents wishing to attend in person. So it was a difficult balance for Okemos schools. And they've really, what the legislature required of them in order to receive their funding was 20 hours of in-person learning per week, 4 hours per day, or some other flexible schedule on a different, if a school district offers less than 5 days per week. So the issue with Okemos is they can't simply expand their school hours per day. If they went and they expanded their school hours to meet the 4 hours, they would end up with children on the bus at 6:30 p.m. Because of the two different blocks, and there's not overlap between those blocks. So the funding that's being withheld from them if they did not adapt is state restricted funding. And it's a unique circumstance because you have school districts like Lansing that are not impacted. Lansing School District's funding is exclusively federal funding. It's Title I funding that goes to school districts for the number of pupils that they have that are on free and reduced lunch. Because Okemos and East Lansing, Hazlet and Williamston have very few pupils that are on free and reduced lunch, they rely on the state funding, which is what was restricted, requiring this March 22nd date of reopening 20 hours per week, and creating these issues for each of our districts, but in particular, Okemos especially. So I thought it was good to stand with our school boards, especially as they go through this difficult time of adapting within about a week's time to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing this to everybody's attention. We have excellent schools here in our township, and it's a shame that there should be any stumbling blocks at all. I had understood that the parents were about 60-40 on wanting in school or stay at home, and that's virtually half each way, which is why Okemos ended up in a real problem, because once they planned for that, it became hard to unplan for that, so to speak, and change what they were doing. Anything else on this? Mr. DeShane.
Appreciate Trustee Opsimer bringing this before the board for our support. Schools are under incredible stress right now. Teachers are, administrators are, and of course, parents and students are as well. To have the legislature playing these games on top of everything else to complicate the situation is really criminal. So hopefully this resolution will help free up the money and take some of the pressure off our excellent teachers and administrators and students and families here in Meridian.
Thank you. Courtney Wazinski, please.
Yeah, I also want to thank Trustee Opsimer and Supervisor for supporting this. As a Okemos school parent, it was, you know, we've watched the school board over the last year carefully and articulately look at what is the safe return policy for Okemos. And we've been out of school. We haven't had in-person school until this Monday was when we started. And then this put a big kink in all of those plans. So you're absolutely right, Treasurer DeShane. The school board, the teachers, parents finding rides, the transportation, everybody is significantly affected by this, as we have been, you know, everybody in the past year. So I really appreciate, again, bringing attention and the support for this ordinance or resolution.
Anything else? I think we oh, Ms. Jackson, yes.
Could I just ask Mr. Opsimer to repeat the gist of the resolution? What is it that we're supporting specifically?
So the legislature has still withheld extensive amounts of COVID relief funding. There was $5.6 billion approved. Roughly 2/3 of that is still withheld due to various provisions, or just was not appropriated in the first place. So in this case, you know, with the school funding, $840 million was not appropriated due to the governor vetoing one of the bills that would have eliminated the Department of Health and Human Services ability to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 and other pandemics. And then this funding in question, you know, if Okemos were not to open or to adhere to these requirements by March 22nd in other districts, that would be another 1.4 billion in funding. So there's a lot of different moving pieces within it in terms of how the funding is being withheld, but we are calling on the legislature to appropriate all $5.6 billion that was approved back in December.
Okay.
And has still yet to be fully appropriated. And depending on the requirements that are still unclear with the township's funding, this could be an issue that impacts us directly with our payment. So.
Okay, thank you. That helps me.
Yeah, I just want to mention, it's a little bit out of order, but with regard to all these resolutions, I know Kirk Guthrie, I don't know if this is on your radar, but you should be sending these copies of these resolutions to the appropriate places. In this case, it will be the leaders of the legislature of both houses. And with regard to other ones, for example, the autism one, perhaps you could work with our press people to get out something to the public to remind them of the importance of good care for autistic children and families, et cetera, et cetera. But just a future note. Okay, we need a vote. Ms. Guthrie.
Thank you, Supervisor Stika. Trustee Jackson,
Yes.
Trustee Absamer,
Yes.
Trustee Sumlin,
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski,
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane,
Yes.
Supervisor Stika,
Yes.
and the clerk votes yes. Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Thank you again, Dan. And I'm gonna thank Dan again. Dan has been busy. He got this started and I kind of finished it. My old boss for almost 40 years, well, he was 30-some years because the last few years of my term was under, in the AG's office, was under different AGs. But Mr. Frank Kelly, who hired me and trained me and mentored me and was in a lot of ways like a second parent to me, professionally at least, passed away at 96. There's literally hundreds of us that are extremely sad over this. He's a great man. In fact, until he was moved to Florida just almost exactly a year ago, I would see him weekly. And still would try to talk to him once he was down there. He'll be missed. Well, he has been missed in the sense that he hasn't been AG for a long time, since 99, but he was a great man. And this is a motion, it's a resolution to honor Frank J. Kelly, who is affectionately known as the Eternal General. Eternal because he not only served longer than any Michigan Attorney General, he served longer than any Attorney General of any state in the United States, or the United States itself, of course. And due to term limits, was he will never be equaled. He cared about people. His thing was to do what's right, not what the agency or the legislature or the governor or anything else wants, but do what the law required and do it right and do it so that it helped people. That was always his thing. He got to be known as the people's lawyer because of that. In any event, we have a motion to adopt this resolution, and I would ask if there was somebody who wants to make that motion.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, clerk. Second. Courtney Wazinski seconded. Okay. And I've told you a little bit about the motion. It got long because I kept adding more things as I thought about Mr. Kelly. His life was very, very full. His professional life. You know, he started out in Detroit. His father was a politician in a sense in Wayne County. He actually ran the state mental institution down there for many years. His father did. He himself, Mr. Kelly, went to law school at the University of Detroit, undergrad and law. He ended up in Alpena, where he ended up, in addition to have his own practice, city attorney. And he spent 37 years as Attorney General of the state of Michigan. And as I said before, was dedicated to people and what their needs were, doing what was right. Ethics were always prime on his radar. And after he retired from the AG, reluctantly in his 70s, he started a law firm with former legislator, Mr. Cawthorn. So it was a bipartisan firm, and it was not only did they practice law and represent clients, they also did some lobbying, which is ironic because Mr. Kelly, while he was Attorney General, and I heard him say this 100 times, didn't give a damn for lobbyists and wouldn't listen to anything they had to say. But then he kind of became one at the end. And then he retired from that firm, and unfortunately now has left us. So there's a good book out that was put out a couple of years ago, which there was a group of us that would meet for breakfast on Saturdays that were sort of ghostwriters of parts of it. I mean, we don't get credit, but it's called The People's Lawyer, The Life and Times of Frank J. Kelly, the nation's longest serving Attorney General. I recommend it to all of you. You can get it through Amazon. Would someone like to make this motion? Or did we do that already? Yeah, we did. Yeah, okay, thank you. All right, Anyone else have anything to say about Mr. Kelly? Ms. Jackson?
Yes, Mr. Steiger, I believe I only met Mr. Kelly once, but I was of the understanding that he was a resident of Meridian Township. Is that?
That is correct. Until he moved up there about a year ago. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
He lived right on Lake Lansing, as a matter of fact. Mr. DeShane.
Thank you for bringing this resolution forward. Frank Kelly really was an institution in Michigan. I was 4 when he became Attorney General, and well over 40 when he retired. He really was a consumer advocate as well, and he took on the big companies. He took on the utilities, and nuclear power was an issue for a long time in Michigan. How many nuclear power plants we should have, and he kept the utilities in check and made sure that they were building the right size plants and they weren't overcharging the consumers. Open Meetings Act, which we all work under, was much his good work, and he became a strong consumer advocate. And I think we're all better off in Michigan because of the groundwork he laid for consumers having rights in the state and not being the victim of corporate malfeasance. So he's missed. Since he left as Attorney General, and of course he was successful because of great assistant attorney generals like yourself, Mr. Steiger. So he leaves a big legacy in the state, and he'll be missed.
Yeah, in fact, he founded the first consumer protection division of any state, the first environmental protection division of any state, and also the first organized crime division of any state. So that was both sides of that coin in a sense. One was law enforcement, others were people protection and environment protection. He was a very forward thinker in that way. And then back in the 60s, he was very, very strong in terms of civil rights and breaking down the redlining, et cetera, that was occurring like in the Grosse Points and area of Detroit, et cetera. He was a big champion of civil rights throughout the whole civil rights movement. He was a good man. He was a good man. Mr. Opser.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly share my favorite Frank Kelly story, which is when he worked as a seaman on the ferries across the Straits of Mackinac. That was pre-Mackinac Bridge. So those ferries would transport the trucks and cars and everybody else to and from the Upper Peninsula and the Lower Peninsula. And he actually, when he left the city of Detroit and went up there and worked, I believe, a summer or 2 on the ferries, he actually lied about his age to acquire the job, which is a little known fact. It doesn't get a lot of attention, but I have read the book and very much admire Mr. Kelly's legacy. The other thought that I wanted to share that's a little known fact, when he was appointed to the office, it was a 2-year term, and I believe it was by appointment only. It wasn't until the Constitution.
It was elected. It was elected. He got appointed because his predecessor moved to the Supreme Court. Go ahead.
Done pre-1963, then the change was to move it to a 4-year term. But
Right.
even in that pre-Kelly era, the average term, most attorney generals only served a year or 2, and they were often looking to greener pastures, and they were often appointed to the Supreme Court. There was not any lineage in terms of that office, and he really made it into the institution that it has become. It was kind of people just overlooked the office prior to his service and what he built it into. And it was quite the revolutionary time when he came in. Kennedy was appointed as the U.S. Attorney General, and Frank Kelly, being the youngest state attorney general, hired a ton of young lawyers, including Ron and Mark Meadows and Mike Moquin, who's another township resident, and really just filled the entire office and built it out with young, fresh ideas straight out of law school. Thank you.
There's probably 20 assistant AGs residing in a former or current. And Mark Bloomer, who's on our planning commission, was an AG as well. I mean, we're everywhere. Oh, so was Peter Terzais. So we're everywhere. You can't escape us in the greater Lansing area, and you can't escape us in Meridian Township. One of the lesser known things about Mr. Kelly he used to like to talk about, he was a big fan of the theater and of comics, etc. And he actually roomed in college for a year with Steve Allen. Now you got to be an old timer to know who Steve Allen was. Steve Allen was a very, very prominent entertainer back in 50s and 60s, and he's one of the original Tonight Show hosts, actually, before there was a Johnny Carson, etc., and kind of created that whole modality. Mr. Walsh.
Well, I haven't been around that long, but I do have a Mr. Kelly story. He used to like to go into Dusty's and have lunch. And I got to know him in Dusty's, and I would go up to him every time and introduce and say hello to him. And you work with Ron? I said, yes, I do. And he would tell me a story about working with you. And every time I saw him, he went back to 1974 when you helped him with a campaign, or he'd tell me a story about going around the state with him. And the next time I would see him, he would tell me a different story. It's as if he remembered telling me the story before. It was always a different story. What a remarkable man, and what a remarkable memory at his age.
Well, I guess we've spent enough of our public time here reminiscing about my beloved boss, or former boss. We do need a vote.
All right. Trustee Jackson,
Yes.
Trustee Opsimer,
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane,
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Supervisor Stika,
Yes.
Trustee Sunland,
Yes.
and Trustee Wazinski.
Yes.
All right, motion carries 7-0.
Thank you all. I'll have to send a copy of this down to Frank E. That's the initial Kelly, as against Frank J., the father, Kelly. That's his son, who's now in Florida. He was a Meridian resident as well, by the way, until about a year ago. Okay, we're now moving on to our discussion items. The 2021 Citizen Survey is our first topic. Are we have an introduction from Ms. Clark?
Yes, you will. Good evening.
Oh, good.
Hello.
Hi.
Good evening, Township Board. The last time we discussed this, we are planning the actions for our community survey. It is a survey that we complete every 3 years. In previous years, we've used the National Research Center out of Boulder, Colorado. But the last survey was just under $15,000. It was a traditional 3-part mailing to 1,600 residents. I do want to make an edit that my last memo had talked about an online survey. The traditional 3-part is the first part mailing to the sample population, requesting what type of survey they would like to have, whether print or a coupon code to take it online. And then it's a second reminder that the survey will come, with the third mailing being the actual survey or the coupon code to take. So that was an edit that I needed to change. In order to meet our expectations and efficiently execute our survey, it is our recommendation to submit a request for proposal to receive additional quotations from expert organizations that can assist us with the survey. This board previously received quotations from Michigan State IPPASR and Cobalt Community Research that met the initial proposal requirements and conformed to National Research Center's previous surveys, with a margin area of about plus or minus 5%. Each entity has a different recommendation for sample size, which is why our suggestion for an RFP to gain additional information from reputable organizations is our suggestion. We are confident that either MSU, ISP, IPBSR, or Cobalt Community Research can provide a quality, scientifically valid survey for our needs. And if the Township Board is interested in other survey elements or modifying our surveys, we would recommend proceeding with the full RFP to collect all of that information from all the organizations and to pick the best of those. Included with the packet is my potential draft for the RFP. With approval, we would be able to begin as early as this Friday with closed bids. As you can see, it includes information of where the bids should go and all of the information we would like to represent in the potential survey. We did also receive some points of reference and comments from the Assistant City Manager of Ferndale in regard to using Cobalt as just a reference from their experience using Cobalt. And the Communications Director of Ann Arbor gave us a reference for utilizing MSU. They use MSU for their Deer Call community survey that they submit. Questions?
Interesting that Ann Arbor would use a MSU surveyor. Interesting. Ms. Guthrie, you had your hand up.
Oh, I know her and she's pretty smart. So I have a question for Director Clark. Do you anticipate a 2-week turnaround for this RFP? And then when do you anticipate the survey to go out? I'm kind of looking at what the timeline is here.
Correct. Well, without submitting the RFP, we're requesting in the RFP that they give us their timelines. I expect the organizations to each have different timelines because my work reaching out to Cobalt and to MSU, they've both given different projected timelines. So I can't specifically answer to that. I would expect the RFP to give me that. As far as a 2-week, I would be able to submit and begin the RFP process by submitting it for opening it this Friday and having a 2-week back.
When did we typically, maybe this is a question, unless Director Clark knows this, from Deputy Director Perry or Manager Walsh, when did we receive those national citizen surveys before? When did those results come in? Just trying to get kind of a rough estimate.
The previous survey, actually, I think we started actually in September, October, and we didn't have the results until like January of 19. I think that was the last what we did in 2018.
So it was about 4 months then.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both.
Ms. Jackson.
Yes, Ms. Director Clark, in your table where you list sample sizes and margin of errors that you would that you're kind of standardizing for our study, the 8,000 person sample size from MSU would cost somewhere less than $15,000, like the National Research Center survey and the Cobalt Community Research Survey?
The 8,000 would cost less. The Michigan State did quote us with an 8,000 sample size at about $13,000. Cobalt Community Research quoted us at a 1,500 sample size at $16,000. I did reach out to the National Resource Center, and their projected quotations for a survey start at $20,000.
I couldn't hear you on that one, Director.
They start, I did reach out to the National Resource Center for a potential quote, and their survey would start at $20,000.
20. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Jackson. You still have the floor.
I was just, I just wanted to add that I was particularly interested in more people participating in the survey. And so I have a preference, at least at this point, for the MSU process. I'm wondering if the choices before us at this point are either to choose between Cobalt and MSU, or to put out a RFP to bring in more applicants. Is that the choice before us at this point?
That would be my recommendation. Yeah, those are two solid. Cobalt and MSU gave us two very solid quotations for their services. And I did get some information from the National Resource Center. In my discussions with them, it was like an hour-and-a-half conversation with them. They've actually been recently bought out by another company out of Wisconsin. So some of the services that they had previously provided have changed, and their program platform has changed. And so what used to be things that were add-ons that this community previously did on their survey are not add-ons, and vice versa. And of course, the cost has gone up.
Right. Thank you.
Treasurer.
Thank you, Director Clark, for preparing this packet for us. And we hired you to develop our businesses and our neighborhoods, and we tasked you with running our surveys instead. So, anyway, you've adapted very well to this new assignment. Thank you for that. Does MSU say why their sample size is so much larger than the other two? Do we have a reason why? Like Trustee Jackson, I like the fact it's 4 times or almost 5 times as big as the other sample sizes. Does MSU say why they take a bigger sample?
Their bigger sample is based on the number of respondents, and they just have a projection of 10%. So their expectation is to get about 800 responses from that mailing. And that would give them about it says plus or 5, but they could fall into maybe a 4% margin of error if they were able to do that.
We all remember just a few meetings back, we took apart the last national survey results that they gave to us, and the sample size seemed so small that probably explains some of the irregularities in the results that we got that showed things like park usage going down. And in fact, we had data showing it going up. And so, regarding the first question, which is, do we want to put this out for an RFP or go with the 3 options we have now? We need to get these results back. I think we can pick from the 3 we have, and amongst those 3, I'm leaning towards MSU.
Trustee Wazinski.
This is just a policy or procedure question, maybe Manager Walsh, but when you have a procurement situation, do we have a policy that says it has to have a competitive bid, or is that not the case?
Yeah, I believe that if it's over, and Mr. Perry, correct me if I'm wrong, or Miss Madison is on this call too. I think if it's over, is it 50,000 or what's the number? We have to get sealed bids if it's over a certain number. If it's over another number, we just take bids. But I believe that the 3 bids before you that you have from Denver, MSU, and Cobalt, I think that meets our purchasing policy. And correct me if I'm wrong, either one of you.
No, the manager is correct. If it's under $25,000, we just need 2 quotations, and we've exceeded that. If it's over $25,000, we have to do a sealed competitive bid process. So we're in compliance with what you have before you tonight.
As I recall, we just updated those numbers not too long ago, didn't we not?
Correct.
Thank you. Yeah, I do remember now. Thank you. I guess the only other comment I would make would be that I am also more comfortable with a larger sample size. I've read through all of Director Clark's information, and I think, you did great due diligence and working with other communities to see what's worked with them as well. I've also, my heart lies green and white, but that's not the case here. So, so I would also lean towards, I'd like to see the full proposal, but I'd lean towards a larger sample size.
Are you saying, just so we're trying to build a consensus, are you saying you're willing to go with the MSU the way we have it now, or do you or you prefer the bid process?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of questions here that Director Clark has laid out, and I would myself personally like to see responses to those questions. So I don't know if that's necessarily an RFP process or if they can just submit a proposal.
All right, we'll continue the discussion. I think Mr. Opsmer had his hand up next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I wasn't necessarily wedded to doing an RFP for this, but we have it prepared. Director Clark has put in the time in preparing it. And if I'm reading Director Clark's recommendation correctly, it's if we want additional information that we discussed at the last meeting on different sample sizes and whatnot, we should just proceed with an RFP. Am I correct, Director Clark?
Yes, that's my intent. It would make it easier and efficient to have just one resource to request all the organizations to submit their information all in the same way. That way they can present themselves in the best manner.
Yeah. And the table represented there on the cover memorandum is the same data we had at the last meeting that we discussed. So I'm perfectly fine with the RFP as it's developed and sending it out. My only note would be, and I know there's been a lot of talk about what is a good margin of error, what's a good sample size. To get, it lists a 1% margin of error and a 5%. The cost is going to be staggering to get a 1% margin of error. I'm just going to tell everybody that we see what the 5% margin of error is. You know, it's sending out anywhere from 1,500 to 8,000 surveys, and we get 300 to 800 back, depending on the approach that the firm takes in developing that. I mean, first you have to get people to open the envelope and not scrap it. That's why response rates can vary. It all depends on the firm's approach and what they typically find. I think referring to the last packet, Cobalt had like a 22 or 23% response rate on their Royal Oak survey that they gave us all the data for. So my only suggestion on the RFP is we should either add like a 3% margin of error, and that could replace the 1%, or you could just put it in there. I guess there's no harm in soliciting more data, but if we just request a 1% and a 5%, one is going to be unaffordable, and the other one is what we have in our packet. So I mean, we're a little scattered on this. I think put 3% in there and send it out, get the responses back, and then we can pick a firm. That's my take on this. Thank you.
I like your idea of adding the 3%. I think that's a more rational approach. Others? But I saw some hands earlier. Right, so assuming we add the 3% into your RFP, you're saying that we could get these out by, you said what, how long, Amber?
I would open the bid.
Thank you.
Good question. Treasurer.
One of the things that took us down this path months ago was looking at the excellent survey done by Manager Walsh and Mr. Perry when they were with St. Joe. And Director Clark, have we given them an example of that survey that asks a lot of questions about a broad range of topics? That so I felt with the national survey, they had their cookie cutter questions, and there wasn't much, 5 questions you could vary from that. But we liked the customized, at least I liked the customized version of that St. Joe survey we liked. Do we know if any of these companies can produce something like that, that asks a lot of questions about the issues that we care a lot about?
Yes. NSU and both Cobalt would allow us to do a customizable survey. And the Natural Resource Center, they give their standard survey, but they also do have a customizable package. Again, that would vary in cost.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Then I don't know, yes, Ms. Guthrie.
So if you were to receive if we didn't do an RFP, hypothetically speaking, and you were to receive quotes like you have correct with these 3 companies, and we're to go with, let's say all the board members are, yay, MSU, we like MSU to do this. And you went with MSU, and they're going to be around 15,000 or whatever their quote is. It's going to be under the number that we don't need to get more than 2 quotes, like Deputy Director Perry stated. Just wondering if we really need to do an RFP, asking the question, or if we can just go with MSU tonight. I don't know if that's a parliamentary procedure question or if
Well,
I feel like the board is saying that they all like the MSU survey, so I'm kind of wondering why go through the process of an RFP if in the end, in 2 weeks, we're gonna get all these quotes and then we're gonna go with MSU anyways, because we like what's been presented by Director Clark. Are we gonna have her go through this same process and do additional work, or do we say, yeah, you know what, we like the MSU thing, yeah, go for it.
without a vote of this board, et cetera, it's basically trying to find a consensus for direction for the management for Ms. Clark and the staff. And I'm hearing, I'm sort of hearing we have one, but I'm not 100% sure. And what I'm hearing is that we're leaning towards going with the MSU IPSR Institute. Yeah, no, we've got a no from Ms. Wazinski. Okay, I'm going to call on Ms. Wazinski before I say anything else.
Yeah, sorry, Supervisor Strike. I am much more comfortable with having a little bit more transparent process while also, being able to compare oranges to oranges. So I know Director Clark has put in a ton of work, and I probably in her head, she has all of that information already, but we have things like it listed in here, references of 4 comparable projects. That'd be fantastic to see. Estimated timelines, other things include like fees or surcharges, those margins of error. I'd really like to be able to compare apples to apples with that. So I myself would support the RFP process even if it takes a couple extra weeks.
Okay. All right, so I'm hearing a couple, at least 2 members that were going in the direction of MSU, another one that's saying we need an RFP process. Looking for others to chime in so we know where we are. Ms. Jackson, do you have a preference?
Yes, I would prefer not doing the RFP and going back to MSU for additional information based on the kinds of things we said we definitely like to see. I noted that at the end of the RFP you proposed, you listed the categories and the types of things that we would ask questions about. I'm a little dubious. I'm a little not impressed by going from a plus or minus 0.3 as opposed to plus or minus 0.5. But we can still ask MSU alone for those questions, for those answers, and still make in a proposal and still make a decision that that's enough for us, or open it up again if it's not.
Okay, there's sort of a hybrid in between here, I think. I'll throw this out. And that is to go ahead and ask MSU's Institute to go ahead and give us all the information that was going to be requested,
right?
That Ms. Clark put together. Have them give that to Director Clark and to the staff, and then see what answers they get and whether that's going to satisfy the comfort level.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to say.
That's maybe not going to satisfy Ms. Wazinski, I'm afraid. Ms. Guthrie.
So when the township asks for quotes, do those usually come back to the board for the board to approve, or do directors just make the decision? Because as township clerk, when I attend closed bids, those closed bids happen, and then staff makes their decision and they move forward with that based off of what the board had already decided. And so I'm kind of confused because I feel like we're backwards, where we would say, yes, go get these bids, and then staff goes and gets the bids, and then they make the decision based off the bids, or they go get the quotes based off the quotes that fall underneath the financial policies that Ms. Madison brought before us that we approved and said, yes, anything under 15,000, you get quotes, staff makes a decision. Anything over 25,000, closed bids, those come in, staff makes a decision. So I'm just trying to, maybe I'm
No, it's,
or don't understand, or I'm just trying to understand the process.
I think Manager Welsh can hopefully help us sort this through.
Hopefully is the key word. So I'll take you back to 8 years ago, and we had a bid for a roof, and the bid was $90,000. And I walked up to Mr. Severy and I said, well, we got to take that to the board. That's how we did things for 17 years with my previous employer. He says, no, we're not. I said, okay, what do you mean? He says, well, the way things work in Meridian is if something is budgeted, we go and we take bids. They've already appropriated the money, and we go and take bids and we take care of it. That's why bids don't come back to you. Now, this is a gray area, but this is how I see things. When things aren't budgeted, such as the survey, it's not a budgeted item, and we do an RFP, I believe it should come back to the board. And so that's why we're at this place. Plus there's some other, issues surrounding this survey this time, much more than what we've had in the past. But the difference is, if something's budgeted, like we can go buy a $400,000 truck, and if it's budgeted and we go out and take proper bidding and go through all the steps, it doesn't come back to the board. And so that's why the difference was the HVAC project was so significant, and it was budgeted, but we did bring that back to the board. But I hope that clears it up. If it's a budgeted item, we go through our process, we take care of it. If it's not budgeted and it's substantial, then we bring it back to the board.
Yeah, my apologies. I did not realize it wasn't budgeted. I thought it was only before us for those 5 questions according to the national survey. So thank you for clarifying that.
Mr. Opsmer?
I guess I'm a little confused because at the last meeting, the board had asked Director Clark to put together the RFP. As a result, some of the questions that we raised aren't answered in the packet because she was going to use the RFP to obtain those answers. So we have it in our packet and it's ready to go out. I'm not quite sure why we wouldn't just send it out at this point and get those answers clarified.
Good point. Ms. Jackson? Nope. Okay, Mr. DeShane.
Yeah, I've come around on this question. We're this close to an RFP. I think Trustee Wazinski brings up some good questions. Let's get these answers from all of them. We can have it in 2 weeks. We're not going to have the answers back from MSU till the next meeting anyway. So if we put out a formal bid, publish it on Friday, we'll have our answers back in 2 weeks. We can review those in advance of the next board meeting and make a definitive decision at our first meeting in April. So we're almost there. Why not complete the process? What's really important about this survey is that all the board members feel good about the results that we're getting back and feel like we looked at more than one vendor. We asked the same question of all the vendors, and we chose the best one because we knew they would give us the highest quality answers and the most accurate answers. So let's continue this process. Taking a shortcut here probably won't even save us any time. And so let's just follow the full process, follow the RFP that Director Clark has pretty much already built, and look forward to this at the first meeting in April, pick a vendor and begin that process at that point of getting that survey out sometime, hopefully by the end of the month in April, if possible. So that's another important question, if we haven't asked it already, is that once we pick them, how soon can they have this result, this survey out to the community?
Is that a question you have in your Director Clark?
Yes, I do ask about survey timelines.
Okay. Well, I think now we finally have reached a consensus on this. We are going to go ahead with your plan, Director Clark, and put out this RFP, add the 3% question in between the 1 and the 5. Although the 1 is probably not worth asking, but what the heck, we'll find out.
Okay.
All right. Then we're done with this matter. We can move on. I guess so. All right. Thank you, Director Clark. Thank you, Manager Walsh, Mr. Barry, and everyone else who helped out. The next item is the expansion of Ready Ride services. This came about because there was a concern expressed, a legitimate concern expressed by board members. In particular, Trustee Wazinski was concerned about access to medical marijuana because none of the providers have provided it. And so the idea that Mr. Treasurer DeShane came up with is why not expand the Ready Ride service to the location in East Lansing that's across from Costco, so that residents can in fact get their medical marijuana in the interim while these would-be licensees are still in the process. And that expanded a little bit. And since then, I have received information from Trustee Opsimer, and it was actually brought up at the last meeting that kind of asked everybody if they had any ideas to chime in, and he's the one who came up with the answers to that, where he has proposed, and you should have it in your packet, adding about 5 other locations, Autism Center of Michigan. There's really no choice other than that. If you're involved with an autistic family member, you probably want to be able to get there. Lansing Urgent Care on Hazlet, which is, we do have urgent cares within the township, but this one is literally within a few hundred feet of our border. It's next to Gildan Woods, so at that point, why not include Gildan Woods, even though we have a Gildan Woods in Okemos and a lot of other daycares. But at this point, it's next door. Monticello's is across the street, and all of those are on their way to the Meyer that we did include in the past. And then there's this Hope Network Neurorehabilitation. I'm not exactly sure where that is, and maybe Mr. Opsberg can help me out with physical location. I see the address, but you know what I mean.
Yep. So East Lansing Drive is actually connected to Merritt Road. So that is located right near Red Cedar Spirits and the location that Treasurer DeShane is proposing.
Okay, so in essence, all of these are either connected right by or connected to areas that we already serve. So it's not adding a lot of distance or anything, just different locations for our residents who don't.
Residents have moved there in retirement. Others have family members there. Others work there. So it makes sense to include Bircham Hills in this, and not to mention many go for rehab there as well. So Bircham Hills is a really important healthcare center for a lot of people in our community. And I would like to include Bircham Hills, and their address is 2700 Bircham Drive in East Lansing.
It wasn't that many years ago that was part of Meridian Township.
I bet they wish they were part of Meridian Township again. With that East Lansing income tax that's a burden on their residents, their employees.
That brings to 7 these locations, all of which are, again, because Bircham Hills again is just down the road from, well, actually the township border is right there, as well as being down the road from the other places. Anyone have any comments or concerns or other places that they want to bring up? And is there any that they think should not be included? Ms. Wazinski.
Thank you, Supervisor. And I also want to thank the treasurer for taking note on expanding Red Ride services is always good for the entire community. So I appreciate that. I have a quick question, and I posed the question before, and I'm not sure I read the response, but the way Ready Ride works, is this a hop on, hop off, or do people get dropped off directly at those facilities if in fact we include those facilities?
I can let others answer, but yes, you get dropped off directly at the facility. You pay a fee. I don't remember the exact amount. We underwrite some of it, can't underwrite some of it. It's not very high, but you have to make appointments for Ready Ride to pick you up and drop you off.
So it's not changing buses or anything like that. It's a
No. You get on the Ready Ride. You call up ahead of time, you schedule it, and then they come to your house, whatever apartment, pick you up, take you to your destination, and then you have, as part of that, you prearranged when to be picked up again and be taken home at the other side of it.
Excellent.
Did I miss there, Mr. Osborne or Mr. Duchesne, you catty guys?
You got it correct. And we owe Trustee Opsimer a great deal of thanks with his work with CATA board. We expand the hours. It used to be 9 to 5. It's now 7 to 5:30. We've added 2.5, 3 hour, almost 3 hours of service to it. CATA is also improving the reservation system. So it can be done now same day reservations and even cancellations. The fare is $2.50 full fare, $1.50 for senior citizens. We also offer a 75-cent fare. Residents can buy a book of 20 rides for $15 or 75 cents a ride. CATA has also agreed for anyone that has essentially no income, they will give them free cards. And Darla in our Meridian Cares office does request a number of those every month from CATA. So we provide it free for those who can't afford even the 75 cents per ride. So CATA has been very flexible on it. While CATA has seen almost a 90% fall off at the worst of the pandemic in terms of ridership, it's come up considerably since then, but it's still way below pre-pandemic areas. Ready Ride never fell below 25% of its pre-pandemic, and now is inching up towards 50%. So it's an essential service for a lot of our residents, and their usage demonstrates that as well. So again, the fare is at $2.50, $1.25, or free.
For those who don't remember, right now, Treasurer Duchesne is our CATA rep on their board. And Mr. Opsmer was for many years and worked extremely well with CATA on our behalf. Mr. Opsmer, you have your hand up.
My only other note to Trustee Wazinski's question is that one of the original service intents of Ready Ride, which is a paratransit program, was connecting people to fixed route. Because we do have underserved areas with fixed route, and that's just the nature of a lot of our land use decisions and a lot of our neighborhoods. It can take quite a walk to get out of the neighborhood into a main thoroughfare. So part of it is connecting people that are nowhere near fixed route, and then you get a free transfer pass. So people will use it to even, you can take it from somewhere that doesn't have fixed route service to the one route on Grand River, and then take it, down to the Capitol Loop, as an example.
Good point. Anything else? It looks like we have a consensus to have this on for action next time with these 7 additional locations. All right, we will do that. Okay, our next item on here is a further discussion with regard to recreational marijuana.
So I would like to see us postpone any further discussion of the ordinance until we've gotten the survey results back.
Anyone else? Mr. Opsmer.
Mr. Supervisor, is our attorney joining us? I do see that there's a Matt in the attendee section. I don't know if that's our attorney.
It could be. He's going to be joining us for our closed session, but did you want him to join us now?
I wasn't sure if he was joining us for this agenda item. I'm asking.
No, he was joining. In fact, I have a number to call to tell him when we're getting close to it. So I don't know if that's him or not, because originally he was waiting for my phone call.
Yeah. So one thing that we didn't touch on at the last meeting that I wanted to touch on was what we can do around social equity. And in our attorney's memorandum, there was a number of recommendations that they proposed to us. And so one thing that we can do for social equity is actually provide reduced fee schedules. So under our medical marijuana ordinances and under MERTMA, local units can assess a $5,000 fee. What our attorneys outlined for us is that we could actually structure that such that there would be a reduction based on any number of qualifiers. But if you look at the Michigan Marijuana Regulatory Agency within LARA, they had proposed a fee reduction at the state level for the fee that the state assesses of 25% for having been convicted of a marijuana-related misdemeanor, and a 40%
We're not sure what's going on right now, Mr. DeShane, but we're working on it.
Are we offline or something, or are we?
I'm not sure what happened. Can you restart your video, Supervisor Stika?
Well, right now I'm showing everybody. You want me to leave the meeting and come back in, or what do you want me to do?
No, hold on. Director Geebies, if we try to enable our video, it's stating you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. I believe.
There you go. Try again, please. I think we got bounced out here.
Yep, correct.
I don't know exactly when everyone else stopped, but I was in the middle of Dan talking.
I will just kind of pick up where I was going. So I was outlining the actual definition that that MRA kind of provides for based on those 3 different fee reduction schedules. So the qualifications that the MRA outlines, they have resided in a disproportionately impacted community for at least 5 cumulative years within the past 10 years. They have a conviction for a marijuana-related offense. And the third possible criteria is they were registered as a primary caregiver. So I wanted to put that out in terms of how we look at this from a social equity standpoint on the fees that we assess as a township as it relates to our applicants. And I'll turn it over to the rest of the board for input. Thank you.
Okay, so, all right. Anyone have any replies or comments or concerns, or is this something we should be looking at for the next discussion so that we can all be up to speed on it, Dan?
If nobody has any additional comments, then yeah, everyone could. It's in the attorney memorandum from our previous meeting on March 2nd.
Yeah, I know. It's from the, yeah. I'm not sure how much people have studied it. Ms. Wazinski.
Yeah, I would just say, I apologize. I haven't looked at it thoroughly, but I will.
It's an important element of it, obviously, and we all should be we should get ourselves up to speed on it. And obviously Dan is, and we're not. Mr. DeShane.
You know, a lot of drug companies offer free and reduced over pharmaceutical drugs for people who can't afford it, but they don't ask the FDA to provide it. They or the regulators to pay it. They pay it themselves. It seems like they've got this backwards, that this is already a questionable financial enterprise for the township. So my first blush at this equity is it seems backwards to me, but I'll be glad to discuss it in a future meeting.
Okay, Dan.
Yeah, and just to speak to the actual intent, in case people missed it, there's been a lot of discussion across the state and in the media on this question of social equity. So what does that mean? What it means is, as we look at an industry that has been in prohibition for centuries, and the disproportionate incarceration of minority communities and demographics in particular, but regardless of race, you know, there are individuals at large who have been disproportionately impacted, and it's ensuring that they have a stake in the industry as well. When the legislature enacted the Medical Marijuana Licensure Act that we opted in under, they put in a number of provisions, some of which required certain capital requirements. So if you're someone that's been disproportionately impacted by prohibition and the criminal offenses involved here, the likelihood that you would have the financial resources to get into the industry and then also have the capital requirements that were provided for under the legislature's Medical Marijuana Act are highly unlikely. So it's about creating that financial equity in terms of access to the marketplace. We're limited as to what we can do, but this is really about righting a systemic wrong over the past several centuries in this country. So I do think it's something that we need to look at, especially as it relates to when permit.
Medical marijuana that no one wants to act on. They've told us it's worthless. So I think we ought to, if we're going to do anything recreational, that's a separate topic. And that we ought to take into serious consideration the idea of rolling back or eliminating our medical marijuana ordinance. It's not being used, and it's exposing us to huge liability should we ever act on recreational. Then all the permits that we approved under medical, which could be anywhere from 6 to 21, could potentially become recreational licenses. That's the interpretation we're getting from our law firm. As long as we leave that medical ordinance on the books, we're highly exposed. So we've been told it's a worthless ordinance. They don't want to act on it. Doesn't do them any good. They need recreational. That's fine. Let's get rid of it. And let's pass a recreational only if the voters approve it. If the survey results show support for it, then we could move forward with a recreational only. This medical ordinance we've got is really an albatross that could only hurt us moving forward. It's really not a good ordinance. We've been told that by Mr. Hank. It doesn't include diversity, doesn't include any ability to bring in local providers. It's not a good ordinance from what we're being told. And it exposes us greatly to being sued in the future and having far more recreational marijuana than we ever intended.
Mr. Opsimer.
I do see that our attorney is in the attendee section, and that's a very direct legal question that was just posed by the treasurer. So
now, if the township were to repeal those, there's still some questions about issued permits and whether there's property rights to those permits.
There are no issued permits, man.
Right, to the special use permits at this point. So, you know, we've discussed some of that in the written material. If we kind of say, okay, repealing that, let's say that takes you back to a position ex ante where there's no marijuana authorized in the township, and then you were to move forward simply with recreational, that does get you farther away from some of the litigation that we've seen, which is where you have operating medical facilities and then a community transitions into recreational, and there's disputes about who gets those recreational permits. So it would seem to potentially limit some of that litigation risk, but given the, you know, that we can't just go back on paper. So I think repealing or changing the way you're approaching the medical permits, whether they ultimately are issued or not, that remains an issue that's going to come into play from a litigation perspective and a risk of litigation perspective under the adult use establishment.
And what would be, based on the memorandum and all the work that you guys have put in, what reduces the litigation risk greatest for the
able to co-locate with facilities that they've received special use permits for, or if not, means that there could, that's still a question there. But yes, if you have, any procedure that gives you a more medical or recreational establishment permits would reduce your risk of litigation.
And I believe your February 16th memorandum had pretty much expressly stated, go with the same number of permits or more, essentially. I don't have that in front of me right this moment, but that was
right.
Pretty much
right, because
stated.
Yeah, at the same time, just as granting more permits would seem to reduce your litigation risk, granting less would seem to increase it. If you have 6 operating medical facilities and then you only authorize 2 recreational establishments, that does seem to be a higher risk situation and is very close to the litigation that's currently ongoing in Traverse City.
Thank you.
But on that last count or last statement, we have to look at where we are versus where theoretically we could be. We have 4 applicants, none of whom wants to do anything. So we don't have anybody with a license permit to operate a medical in our township, which is something we, as a board, decided we wanted. Nothing's happening with regard to that. How have we taken anything away from anybody if we opt out of medical and opt into recreational with a different number or whatever? Because otherwise, don't we have a possibility of having 12, 6 medical and 6, if we use the zoning aspect, 6 recreational. I see head nodding, but I'm not hearing anything.
So, yes, I mean, those are all good points. We haven't specifically analyzed the property right question in a fact-intensive way, but I do see the point you're making, which is that without a permit issued, then there would be a hard argument to make that there's any type of property right in the permit because all they have is the application. And from a special use perspective, although some special use permits have been issued, the zoning law is more clear that some actual building or improvements typically have to be taking place before that property right in a special use permit would vest. And I'm not aware whether or not those activities have taken place. I suspect potentially not. So that does mitigate against the argument of if there was a repeal of the medical ordinance and there was an argument for vested property rights from these permit applicants, that we would have a defense to that. But what we've laid out at this point is that canvassing the issues and raising that there's it would be a point that potentially could be raised by those industry participants.
Dan? Okay, no, excuse me. Deborah, sorry.
Thank you, Supervisor Stika. Matt, you said in order to reduce litigation, you have to have unlimited available permits for recreational marijuana. Is the opposite true if you have 0 and opt out? What is the litigation possibility then to just remain as we are?
Right, so the litigation risk is small. I mean, that's the situation you're in right now, is that you've opted out, you have an ordinance on the book prohibiting it because that's what MRTMA requires the township to do. So that's your position right now.
So is that the smallest litigation risk then, smaller than opening it up to as many permits as possible in the township?
That's an interesting question. I would tend to say they're probably equal, right? And you've got the different sides. The folks who don't want marijuana are of course very happy with no permits available, and so that contingent who might do something is happy. Versus when you have unlimited permits, then of course the industry participants or folks who want recreational marijuana, they're happy. So when you think about who might bring litigation for various reasons, I would see those as equal. The one point I will make is that in either case, the petition situation is still out there in an establishment's context. So although you have no establishment permits authorized right now, there's no litigation risk, or there's small litigation risk regarding that, but there is a petition option that a citizen could bring a petition to ask for an ordinance that would permit a certain number. So a different type of risk, but that's kind of what's out there on the extremes.
And what is the unlimited number? I mean, when you say unlimited number, you're not talking like 1,000 permits. I mean, when you say unlimited available permits, what is that number that I'm sorry, you jumped to my screen. When you say unlimited available permit numbers, what is that number?
Right. So I mean, that's hard to say. On one hand, yes, unlimited is the actual number. For example, that's what East Lansing has. They simply have no cap. So the technical number is unlimited. The practical number would be what satisfies the market. So for example, I've worked in communities where they put a 50 license cap. And for all intents and purposes, that was an unlimited cap because they look at the demand and they're pretty certain they're not going to hit 50. So yes, the township could still adopt a large number, you know, whatever that is, 50, 25, 12, that would satisfy demand, and anyone who came forward with an application would be able to get one. So for example, I think we had 25 to 27 applications for the medical permits.
Is demand based on consumer demand, or is it based on business demand? Is it based on what people want to build, or is it based on what people want to consume?
Right. From the township's perspective right now, I would say it's based on business demand. Who wants to come forward and put something into the township? And of course, that's a very murky crystal ball, which is, you know, where I was kind of going with the other comments of trying to pick that number of what would satisfy that, other than saying unlimited would be difficult to do without overshooting.
So when you're using the term demand right now, you're using the term demand in regards to businesses demanding to come here, not residents demanding to have these businesses come here. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, because again, I'm evaluating this from a legal litigation risk type perspective.
Thank you.
Treasurer.
So just to be clear, Matt, you're saying that 25 might be a number that wouldn't get us sued. Anything less than that would likely get us sued by the producers. Do you know of any cases where citizens have sued the township or the city council because they didn't opt in? Or do they take it to the vote? Is their recourse been to take it to the voters in the form of an election?
Right. I think the recourse there is to take it to the voters in the form of an election. Then there has been litigation about those election petitions. So to the extent there's litigation surrounding that, it's typically the petition starts first, and then there might be questions about how that gets administered or interpreted.
And my guess is the same people that are suing for the petitions are the ones that are suing, which is the marijuana producers that didn't like the petition language and are trying to keep it off the ballot. That'd be my guess there. But so citizens aren't suing township boards or city councils for not opting in. The lawsuits are coming from the industry. Is that correct?
That's my read on it. You know, when the lawsuits themselves, right? It's you know, the citizens of Three Rivers or citizens of Three Rivers for jobs type thing. So how many citizens are part of that initiative versus how many industry participants are part of that advocacy group in that local area, you know, really hard to say from outside. I'm not aware of a purely citizen-based litigation action. I suppose I could say it that way.
Again, to recap, you would think we need to limit, we would have to allow 25 or so recreational marijuana stores before we avoided being sued by these producers for leaving them out. Is that my understanding what you just said?
Right. I think it's hard to put a number on it, but that based on what we saw in applications before, I think that's a fair ballpark figure.
So any reasonable number 1, 2, 4, even 6 is going to still, even if it, to me, that's a wildly high number, far more than we need in Meridian Township. That would still, even that very big number of 6 recreational facilities, we would still end up with many, many lawsuits. Is that your assessment?
The potential exists. It does, and it depends, you know, in part on the final ordinance itself.
Okay.
How we craft any competitive review, whether we're using a zoning buffer system to create those limitations in actual permits. But yes, the main thrust of your question, the litigation risk exists with especially anything below 6, and I think even at 6.
Okay, and those lawsuits, again, are coming from industry, not from the citizens. So I think this board needs to be aware that if we're going to proceed with recreational, we need to set aside, what, $500,000 legal defense, $1 million? We're going to end up in court indefinitely by these producers. So stepping in is going to cost the township a lot of money in lawsuits alone. And that has to be a factor as well. Are we prepared to spend $500,000 of our residents' money defending lawsuits to opt in to have recreational marijuana stores, which our citizens aren't asking for, but the producers are. So they're asking us to change the ordinance so they can open up here. If we don't give them enough permits, they're going to sue the hell out of us, excuse my language, but they're going to. And so we're going to spend a ton of money defending lawsuits for an ordinance we're doing on their behalf. Is this insane or what? I just can't believe we're even given this serious consideration, knowing the morass we're about to step into if we opt into recreational marijuana. We've gotten 36 letters on recreational marijuana since February 10th. 33 of them have been from citizens opposed to it. 3 have been in favor of it. This is not a citizen-led initiative. This is an industry-led initiative. Trustee Opsman arranged those tours of the facilities. It wasn't citizens saying you should go to East Lansing to those facilities. It was them coming to us saying, come see what our great facility we have in East Lansing. Clerk Guthrie talked to thousands of people last year running for clerk. Not one mentioned access issue. Not one mentioned there's an absence of medical marijuana facilities. Not one mentioned we need recreational facilities. Our citizens aren't asking for this. The industry is. And now we're being told by legal counsel, we are going to spend a lot of money and a lot of time in court if we don't give them 25 or more recreational facilities. Where is our good sense? Where's our common sense about this? Why would we do something as insane as allow recreational marijuana facilities, even at a high number like 6, knowing we're going to then be sued by the other 20 that didn't get their license? This is the most dangerous, fiscally irresponsible thing this board could be considering. And we're going to pay a huge price for it this year and next year and in 2024 when the election comes around. All the good work this board has done the past 4 years will be erased by this reckless and really bad decision to opt into recreational marijuana. By changing the Ready Ride ordinance as we did tonight, we've solved the access issue. Anyone can get medical marijuana from Pleasantries for $1.50 or $1.25 or less of a ride. So access is not the issue. So what is the reason for doing this? What is the reason for stepping into this very litigious area that our community is at best split and most likely opposed to? What's the upside here? I'm just not seeing any upside. All we're hearing is the downside to this. So I ask you, Trustee Sundlin, you've been in favor of this. What's your reason? What's the public policy, Trustee Sundlin, and moving forward with this? You've been in favor of it.
Board members are asking other board members questions.
Yeah, that's
okay. I'll leave it to the trustees that have supported this. What is your public policy? What is the public policy benefit of moving forward with recreational marijuana? I haven't heard anything articulate. I've heard a lot of people nodding after one trustee who liked it, but I haven't heard a lot of good public policy reasons for opting into recreational marijuana. And we've gotten more reasons for not doing it again tonight from our attorney, but I'm not hearing any good public policy reasons for opting in. And if we're going to move in that direction, and 4 of you have been in favor up to this point, I would like to know your reasons for supporting it, because I haven't heard them yet.
Ms. Businski.
So I want to thank our legal counsel first off. That was helpful. And I do plan to read into this a little bit further, but to speak to Treasurer Shane, there's multiple reasons why I am in support of recreational marijuana outside of the litigation component. You know, it can bring a lot of good to Meridian. First off, it can bring jobs that are paying $15 to $18 an hour with full benefits. And here in COVID, we've been losing jobs. So I think that that's something to consider. Back to the accessibility issue, you know, in the interim, having a ready ride to one facility for medical is fantastic. But long-term, is that really equitable? Is that something where everybody can access that and get there when they need to? Is that something we want to have more access to? And really important to me is the social justice component of it. For over and over, we keep hearing that, you know, we have it in our neighbors. East Lansing has it, Lansing has it. Why do we need it here? That sits really uncomfortable with me, because we're saying it's okay, go use it. We're not judging you, but we just don't want it here in Meridian. And so I have a hard time with that, because we're a little bit in the middle of medical marijuana. So I was there to vote on the end all be all, but I wasn't there in the planning. But I know this board put a lot of work and intention into that planning, designing those overlay districts. So I feel that we can do that, still be socially equitable, and still, you know, at least minimize our litigation. So that's what I have to your response, Treasurer.
Ms. Guthrie.
I'd like to respond as well. I would like to concur with the former clerk that accessibility has never been an issue. It was never an issue for me in high school. It was never an issue for anyone I knew in high school. It's never been an issue for current kids who are in high school. It's an issue of how to get it out of high school, how to get acid out of high school, how to get pot out of high school, pot, medical, recreational, whatever you want to, it's never been an accessibility issue. I don't know anyone who hasn't been able to access marijuana. I don't know anyone. I smoked it in high school, and when I got pregnant with my first son, I haven't smoked it since 1990. I shared a story with Trustee Opsimer of bad incident where I know something was laced, and I was more than happy to approve regulated recreational marijuana. So I don't believe that access, if you want it, you're going to get it. If you want alcohol, you're going to get it. If you want a drug, you're going to get it. If you need medicine over the counter, I need Advil, cold and sinus to get rid of my migraines. Guess what? The pharmacy at Meyer in Okemos isn't open 24/7. So if I have a migraine in the middle of the night and I have nothing in my house, you either have to have unlimited or opt out. That's my basic concern, because I think that you can get it anywhere if you want it.
Mr. Asper.
I first want to clarify something, and then I'll ask our attorney to respond. There were a lot of assumptions made in what was asked of the attorney. What MERTMA says and what the attorneys have outlined in our memorandum is that you need to have explicitly written into the ordinance, if you have more applications than permits available, expressly written in, meaning numerically, if we're numerically capping it, and we receive more applications than we receive, then we have to use a point scoring system. But if we do the same, we have this medical ordinance, we've created these overlay districts with consideration to how we regulate zoning in this community. And all we have to do is, instead of saying in the ordinance, one per facility or one permit per overlay district, if we simply say the facilities have to be located in the overlay districts and they can't be within X feet of each other, that naturally says one per overlay district. It's a different way of achieving the same thing. And then we could actually use the special use permit approval process for approving these facilities the same way we would with an auto dealership, large development, drive-through windows, the planning commission approves those special use permits, and we have 2 or 3 other special use permit processes. And so that eliminates that process for us. The other thing that the memorandum explicitly says is that if we keep in line with our medical ordinance in terms of the number of permits, but mechanically uncap it through that process that we've discussed by regulating it intensively with the existing zoning, then that pretty much reduces litigation exposure the same way that East Lansing has a cap of 7. But if you read their ordinance, it doesn't say they're limited to 7. They did it with the zoning through that process, and they opted in and they had no litigation resulting. Now, you know, the other thing that needs to be factored here is our attorneys mentioned the petition option. To put that in lay terms, what that means is the voter initiated act that we all approved in 2018 allows for citizens to collect signatures. You only need about 1,100 in Meridian, and that number may actually decrease in the future because it's 5% of all votes cast for governor in the previous election. And so we also bear litigation exposure depending on what voters might approve in the future. And so if voters approve something, like in the city of Port Huron, where it passed overwhelmingly when voters put it on the ballot, they had that provision where they couldn't, the council couldn't reform it or amend the ordinance for 2 years. And you're just left with whatever, however that is codified or drafted based on the citizens that put it onto the ballot and collect signatures. We still have to administer that ordinance. And there's been a lot of communities that have gone that route, but to speak to the treasurer's points, for me, if we want to be an active participant in getting rid of the illicit market, opting in is the best way to do that. The more communities that opt in to create access to the legal marketplace, the more we will reduce demand in the illicit marketplace, and the fewer people will actually grow and be the distributor within the illicit marketplace. So every community that opts in helps toward that end. You know, we don't have bootleggers anymore either, because there is no prohibition anywhere on alcohol, and there's a reason. And in doing so, we create access to safe and tested products that are actually labeled. I don't know that anybody would go to, you know, their neighbor or some random person and buy a bottle of alcohol if they had no idea what was in it. And that is the reality out there right now, predominantly. And yes, can people go to Lansing and get it, or East Lansing and get it? Yes, they can. But we're playing that small role that we can play in getting rid of the illicit marketplace. And to the same point, if there's so many societal ills that will come about, I guess I'm perplexed as to why those aren't already ailing this community. You know, when I look at peer-reviewed research, the #1 predictor of a child's educational attainment is the educational attainment of their parents. If marijuana was a societal ill that was going to wreak havoc on the community, it would have already done so, because it's already prevalent here, and it's not the safest product because people, you know, it's been the illicit product that people don't know what they're consuming. And to Trustee Wazinski's point, I do think, based on the studies I've read and just based on the logistics of legal marketplaces, it will reduce access to youth. Youth can buy direct in the illicit market. There's nothing preventing youth from buying direct in the illicit market. It's an illegal transaction. There's already liability for whoever's participating in that transaction. Youth can't even get in these facilities. You can go to a Rite Aid right now and find all sorts of alcohol containers that have no security cap on them. And those can be pocketed and the youth can walk out if they can get away with it. These facilities are highly regulated. And the more commerce that we put into a regulated place like that, we are reducing youth access. I don't see how you could argue against that. And the studies are starting to bear that out from Washington and Colorado. So for me, those are the primary factors from a public policy standpoint. For me, it's not about the revenue. We don't need revenue in Meridian Township. We will have the highest tax base pretty soon. Could we do good with that money? Yeah. Ann Arbor, there's a story in MLive today that Ann Arbor is doing a lot of things to help support, members of their community that have been wrongfully prosecuted for marijuana and have had their records expunged, but there's still undue harm that has been done. So they're using their excise tax revenue for that. There's all sorts of things that we could use it for, but for me, when I look at the logistics, a regulated legal marketplace is a good thing. And the final thing is, to the clerk's point as well, these transactions have been occurring. I don't think anyone started picking up this habit because it became legal in 2018. Folks that have wanted to use it and make an adult decision have been doing it. So the transactions likely haven't changed. The monetary value has, because to get it in the legal marketplace, it's twice as expensive, which also reduces youth access. But what does the legal marketplace do? It actually drives tax revenue. Imagine if we just got rid of if you did the same thing with alcohol and it all became an illicit transaction and then we lost all that excise tax revenue for the schools. Are we doing any good? Because there would still be an illicit market where those transactions occur, but the tax revenue derived in the legal market can actually do some good. It can treat substance abuse disorder. It can fund roads and schools, local government. It can fund mental health services at the county level. The county would get matching funds from the excise tax revenue for each community that does opt in. So those are the public policy reasons for me, and I've outlined those. So I do take exception to this idea that anyone is hiding from this. We've had meetings on this since November. I think that's completely unfair judgment to levy against anybody on the board, regardless of where you come down on the issue. So with that, turn it back over because I don't want to belabor the point. Thank you.
Other members? Ms. Jackson.
I will take this opportunity to add just a couple of points that speak to me from a policy perspective on this issue. The first is the actuality, the reality that this is a growing and legal would arguably show that these impacts are the very same for the same number of bars and alcohol outlets. And so I do not see that as a valid argument to elevate public health and community safety and the misuse of community resources. Finally, I am particularly in favor of, if marijuana is going to be available in this community and any other community, I thoroughly support, I wholeheartedly support a system in which the state oversees, regulates, and standardizes both the growth and production of the product and the distribution of the product and the promotes the health and safety for the public by how it requires the product to be presented. Those are the reasons in which I am, in addition to many of the things offered, many of the elements offered by Clerk Guthrie, by Ms. Wazinski, and Mr. Officer. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's important that we remember we're not talking about 6. We're talking about 12. 6 medical, 6 recreational. Anyone else? Ms. Jackson?
I take issue with that conclusion because we've never, we haven't written an ordinance that talks about 12.
Unanimously, I feel like that's false option is being offered, because then the talking point will be, okay, well, now we have rec, but no medical, and so what's the point in opting in? That's a false option that's being presented. We have an ability to prioritize scoring on the special use permit process, which would prioritize the existing medical permit holders, because we do want medical. That's one of the reasons we're not going to get medical facilities unless we opt in on recreational, because of the timing in which we adopted our ordinance. We completed our lotteries in October of 2019, 2 weeks before Laura released the rules. So our attorney's memorandum is pretty clear. We do have means by which we can express that in codifying the ordinance.
I didn't read it quite as broadly as you, because nobody actually has. I saw that you could somehow write it to give some points, whatever you want to call it, for those who have a medical permit license, but nobody does.
Can I ask a specific?
And nobody's going to build one. They have told us they do not want to build medical marijuana establishments and open them in Meridian Township. So why are we continuing to push that? Let's just go with the recreational then.
Can I ask a specific question of the attorney to that effect? To the effect of what I
Sure.
said? So Matt, can a community develop a scoring system that would supplement the special use permit approval process, that would basically, a majority of the points would be weighted upon those pre-existing factors that you guys outlined in your memorandum? If a majority of the points are assigned to those, that is a way of carrying forward the medical permitting, the existing medical permit holders, so that we do have medical facilities.
In an attempt to directly answer your question, I'm going to say no, but I see several different questions really nestled in there. The framing, putting it in the SUP context, is most relevant if your zoning buffer zones are the ones driving who's has a number of available permits. In that context, if you had a case where 2 applicants were coming before the planning commission at one time, then you would use some type of framework to decide who's essentially considered first, which could potentially, if they're approved and then the second application's within their buffer zone, could possibly mean that second applicant can't operate. So in that zoning-led context, I think the question you're really asking, the answer there would be yes.
That's the assumption I was making, because that's the discussion that the board has had that resulted in your first recommendation in the last meeting. So that's the assumption I was making, is if we cap through zoning, then can we establish a point scoring and special use permit approval process that prioritizes those pre-existing factors, so that we can have 6 medical and recreational facilities?
To the extent it's necessary to break a tie in terms of which applicants are submitted to the planning commission and the township board, then yes, I think that's a set of factors that could be put together.
Mr. I'm sorry, did you have more, Mr. Officer? I don't want to cut you off.
No, I was just saying thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, Matt.
Mr. DeShane.
Dan, your question kind of brings back my original point, which is you say with a scoring system and a special use permit and pre-existing factors, can we use our existing ordinance? Okay, you've got 3 different areas there where we're going to be sued on this for. You might see a glide path here, but those that have been turned down are going to pick on the point system or this SUP or the pre-existing factors. So this is just opening us up to tremendous amounts of litigation. I am not opposed if a survey results or the voters approved recreational marijuana, I would not stand in its way, and I would want to craft an ordinance with the right number for our township. Okay, but these medical licenses we have are in the way. And all we heard in November and December when you brought this up, how worthless our medical permits were. Okay, so let's get rid of them. Let's start fresh. After we get if and after we get a consensus from our survey, the citizens want recreational marijuana, then we proceed with that. Why are we holding on to these medical permits? We've been told they're worthless and they're going to cost us a ton in litigation. So I'm with a supervisor. Let's repeal that ordinance and talk about recreational, which is what they want to do anyway. Otherwise, we're going to end up through litigation, ending up with not with 6, but 12 or far more than that, because there's tremendous opportunities for us to be sued because the law is not that clear on this. As Matt has pointed out, you can get legal opinions all across the spectrum on this. And look what has happened to other communities. Most have been sued many times over this. Traverse City is a great example of that. They've allowed recreational, but were sued heavily by the industry when they didn't give the number of permits they wanted. So let's do this right. Let's first of all wait for our citizens to see if there's support for it. If there is, then we move forward with a recreational only permit and get the medical out of the way. The advocates for the industry, the providers have told us again and again, there's no more demand for medical. We can satisfy that with a recreational marijuana store. Fine, let's proceed with that. Let's start over again. We've been, as I mentioned earlier, we've been told that our medical ordinance stinks anyway. It has no inclusion, it has no diversity, it has very little local preference. So let's get rid of it. Why stand with a dead horse that's only going to hurt us in the future? Thank you.
I'm gonna, I see Ms. Walensky has her hand up. We're trying to wrap this discussion up and we'll have to continue another meeting because we've got some important stuff to do in our closed session and time is running. Ms. Walensky, go ahead.
Understood. I just want to pose the question about removing medical permits and revising with just recreational. I can see where you might be going. That might be cleaner. It brings me back to accessibility, and I want to clarify when I say accessibility, that's to medical marijuana. So medical marijuana is there for people with chronic diseases and disabilities that might not have the opportunities and or the resources to be able to get their medicine. So that's where I say accessibility, that's what I mean. But if we remove medical altogether, you know, there's a huge cost difference for the consumer. So recreational costs a tremendous amount more than medical, and
it's actually 6% tax difference.
Excise and consumer cost, and that as well as the potency. So recreational has a smaller potency than medical is allowed to have. So those are just some considerations I just want to think about.
Okay, look, we do need to move on, but Ms. Guthrie, go ahead.
To Courtney's point, I'm sorry, to Trustee Wazinski's point, my apologies. The strains are different. From medical and recreational, and what the medicinal needs are, those strains are different. And so you know, I concur with was this Gates' point on the accessibility to medical marijuana. And while, you know, maybe the ordinance is crap, maybe it's not good, I don't know. I'm not an expert on it. But what I heard from, and maybe there are some people on this Zoom who are in the industry, what I heard was not necessarily completely throwing out medical. It was that they can't survive medical alone, that they needed the recreational component along with the medical. That's what I heard. Anyone can correct me if I'm wrong. So that was my final point on that. Thank you.
Matt, that gets into the co-location thing. Can you explain that again? The points that Ms. Guthrie just raised.
Yes, I think it's section 6 of the MRTMA, section 6.5, so subsection 5 of that section has co-location language that limits how a municipality can limit the co-location of a grower, processor, and retailer. The language is written in such a way that it's not clear whether they mean co-location of recreational establishment types or whether they mean co-location of medical facility types or both, and whether that language would control over the township's authority in the beginning of that section, subsection 6.1, to set the limit on the number of establishments within the community. It is one of the points I believe that is raised in the Traverse City litigation. They at least put it in their complaint, whether it will ultimately be resolved or not. But that is another aspect of the MRTMA and how it's going to interact with any medical permits that does remain unresolved at this time.
Okay. All right, I think we should move on to our next. We'll have this on obviously continuing discussion next time. And we should move on to comments from the public. Mr. Gibbies, are you there?
I am here. Yes, we are able to take public comment at this time. Stand by 1 second, please. People in the attendee area are, of course, able to use the raise hand feature in order to make public comment, or we can take telephone calls at 517-349-1232. Our first speaker will be Robert Baldori. Please begin your public comment with your name and address for the record.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, sir.
Okay, Bob Baldori. I've lived in this community since 1968, approximately 53 years. My law office has been advocating for the legalization of marijuana for close to 40 years for the reasons stated in that 1973 unanimous decision of the Michigan Supreme Court, which I quoted to you before, which stated, among other things, that the prohibition of marijuana is more harmful to society than its use. The will of the voters of Meridian Township is well known. 61% of the electorate voted for the decriminalization and the legal availability of both medical and adult use marijuana. It's the responsibility of this board to facilitate the will of the voters and implement policies that will carry out that will. In my experience of acquiring licenses for clients from Detour, Michigan, to Buchanan, to Jackson, to Detroit, all over the state, these well-regulated establishments have been a benefit to the communities they are in every way, with negligible to non-existent disadvantages. Treasurer Duchesne, with all due respects, his speculation is totally out of touch with the real world. Medical is not worthless, in spite of the way he's paraphrasing my good friend Jeffrey Hank, who would not agree with that. And it's not prone to litigation. Most have not been sued, contrary to what Mr. Duchesne said. That hasn't happened anywhere in the state. Literally hundreds of municipalities have opted in without any significant litigation to speak of. So in what world is litigation over a reasonable ordinance prone to litigation? There are 0 examples in the real world, including right next door in East Lansing. Examples, templates, and models up for opting in both medical and adult use, and they have to go together for it to be financially viable, abound all over the state. It's just a matter of political will and competence to do the same here in Meridian Township. We're in the 3rd year since adult use was approved by Meridian Township. I strongly encourage this board to end prohibition in this township and to acknowledge and honor the will of the Meridian Township voters. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ms. Vancouvering calling in. Please state your name and address for the record.
Joyce Vancouvering, 5882 Okemos Road. Supervisor Stika, member of the board, members of the board. First, I'd like to thank you for your thoughtful discussion tonight. But one thing I would really like to see is that the board make a decision or reach consensus on doing a survey before moving forward. And I voiced that concern last night, or excuse me, at the last meeting. And I don't believe I heard a consensus tonight. So I hope that we can, that you'll consider that before taking further action. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Vancouvering will be followed by looks like Mark Santoni. You need to unmute yourself, state your name and address for the public record.
Yes, my name is Mark Santucci. I live at 5909 Blythefield Drive in East Lansing, but Meridian Township here. It was said that no one has applied for a medical marijuana license in Meridian Township. That's not true. I own the property where over a year ago, someone applied. Here, I looked for someone else who was interested in doing a medical marijuana license. I found a group that was interested in doing it. The only reason it hasn't gone to the Planning Commission at this time is they have had great difficulty finding a firm that can do their site plan for them because the economy, in spite of what we hear, has been booming. And so Kebs, who they went to first, had a 6-month waiting time before they could even get started on it. So they had to go outside the Lansing area. That within the next month or so, all of the information that they need to present to the Planning Commission will have been obtained. They have already spent thousands of dollars on doing it. I have found 3 partners to build the building for them. We're going to spend over, basically it's on an if-come proposition because we all know we can't make money on medical marijuana alone. But we also know that someone had to step forward and show the township that this could be done and it could be done well. And our expectation was that at some point in the future, recreational marijuana would become legal in Meridian Township. We're taking a risk, but we felt someone had to do it. And as far as no one suing, if you got rid of medical marijuana, you would be sued. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have no other callers and no other hands at this time, sir.
Okay. Other matters on the board? Okay, where we're going next is we have a closed session, and we'll need a motion to go into closed session to discuss a written confidential legal from the township attorney concerning payment of prevailing wages and potential litigation.
I move to go into closed session for confidential session with the township attorney regarding payment of prevailing wages.
It's moved by DeShane, supported by Jackson. Is that correct, Ms. Jackson? Yep. All right. Ms. Guthrie, you want to take the vote, please?
Yes, Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Treasurer DeShane,
Yes.
Trustee Jackson,
Yes.
Trustee Opsmer,
Yes.
Trustee Sumlin,
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski.
Yes.
Who did I forget? Supervisor Syka.
You forgot me, yes.
All right.
So we are now in closed session. So you should have received, and make sure you have it. We're going to be going out of this Zoom and into a different Zoom, which will be limited to just the participants in the closed session. And then when that is over, we will come back into the open session on this Zoom again. And the only thing that will happen then is we may or may not have an action item that comes about as a result of that session. So we should go out of this Zoom and into the other Zoom.
Thank you, Director Geebies. Oh, we've got a number of people. Frank's over an attendee, Courtney as well. Matt now too.
Yep, I'm gonna pull them over right now.
We need Alexander Haig right now.
I'm in charge here.
Exactly. Thank you. I'm glad somebody got my joke. Remember him? Alexander Haig. He was that when Reagan was shot?
Yep.
Yeah.
January of 81.
Yep. He was in charge now.
I was born in 75. It's not fair, Frank.
Are you talking about when our wonderful general, ex-general, decided he was in charge of the country when Reagan was shot?
Yes, we are.
How'd that come up?
You were missing.
Okay, Dan.
I move to go back into open session.
Support.
Supported by the treasurer. We have to do a roll call. Deborah?
Robin didn't have that little portion in my little cheat sheet for taking votes, so I had to write that down. All right, sorry about that. I vote yes. Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Treasurer DeShane.
Present.
Trustee Jackson.
Yes.
Trustee Opsimer.
Yes.
Trustee Sunland.
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski.
Yes.
Supervisor Stika.
Yes.
Did I get everyone?
I think so.
Okay. All right. 7-0.
Okay. We are now in open session, and I'm going to propose a motion, and maybe somebody would like to make it. It's a motion to adopt, in accordance with the Michigan Administrative Procedures Act and state law, guidelines for voluntary agreements with contractors for construction, maintenance, or repair services provided directly to the township as attached to our materials.
So moved.
Moved by Jackson. Is there support?
Support.
Wazinski. All right. Discussion. Mr. Osprey, you want to discuss?
Sure, I'll start. So, the step that we are taking tonight is to legally make a minor change to our policy and move it more to a guideline. The implication here is that we are still providing for prevailing wage on all township projects at or in excess of $50,000 on the RFP. And we are, maintaining in solidarity with our labor unions across the region and state, our commitment to upholding prevailing wage and supporting jobs that provide a living wage, a secure retirement, and good benefits.
Other members? Are we ready to vote? Oh, yes, Mr. DeShane.
This is the same policy we have followed with our own employees. And yes.
Supervisor Stika.
Yes.
Trustee Opsimer.
Yes.
Trustee Jackson.
Yes.
And the clerk votes yes. Motion carries 7-0. I got everyone right?
Right.
Okay.
Take a picture of that proposed language and send it to you, Deborah.
Thank you.
We're ready to adjourn. Yes, Mr. Osmer,
I move to adjourn.
Support.
ordered by the treasurer. All those in favor, just put your hand in front of your face. Everybody says adjourn. Thank you, Matt, for your help. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Thank you, Miriam. You hung in there. Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Night, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Gabies.
You're always welcome.